The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beats. More information is available over at thomsbeats.com, thomsbeets.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Thom, Thom. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from the Thom Hartmann Reader, and this is from page 39, chapter titled An Informed and Educated Electorate. The epigraph, the quote that opens the chapter, is from Thomas Jefferson. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Whenever the people are well informed, however, they can be trusted with their own government, that whenever things get so far wrong as to attract their notice, they may be relied upon to set them right. Into the chapter. Talk radio news service based in Washington, D.C. is owned and run by my dear friend Ellen Ratner. Ellen is an experienced and accomplished journalist, and a large number of interns and young journalism school graduates get their feet wet in reporting by working for her. In March 2010, I was in Washington for a meeting with a group of senators, and I needed a studio from which to do my radio and TV show. Ellen was gracious enough to offer me hers. I arrived as three of her interns were producing a panel discussion type of TV show for web distribution at talkmedianews.com, in which they were discussing for their viewing audience their recent experiences on Capitol Hill. One intern panelist related that a White House correspondent for one of the big three TV networks had told her that the network registered a huge amount of interest in the hot story that week of a congressman's sexual indiscretions. Far less popular were stories about the debates on health care, the conflicts in the Middle East, and even the Americans who had died recently in Iraq or Afghanistan. The intern said, so that's the story they have to run with on the news, relating the substance of the network's correspondents' thoughts, because that's what the American people want to see. If the network doesn't give people what they want to see, viewers will tune away and the network won't have any viewers, ratings, or revenues. The other two interns commiserated with the first about what a shame it was that Americans wanted the titillating stories instead of the substantive ones, but they accepted without question that the network was therefore obliged to, quote, give people what they want, end quote. When they finished their panel discussion, I asked these college students if they knew that there was a time in the United States when radio and TV stations and news networks broadcast the actual news instead of infotainment because the law required them to. None of them had any idea what I was talking about. But the reality is that from the 1920s, when radio really started going big in the United States, until Reagan rolled it back in 1987, federal communications law required a certain amount of public service programming from radio and television stations as a condition of retaining their broadcast licenses. The agreement was basic and simple. In exchange for the media owners being granted a license from the Federal Communications Commission to use their airwaves, owned by the public, they had to serve the public interest first, and only then could they go about the business of making money. If they didn't do so, when it came time to renew their license, public groups and individuals could show up at public hearings on the license renewal and argue for the licenses being denied. One small way that stations lived up to their public service mandate was by airing public service announcements for local nonprofit groups, community calendars, and other charitable causes. They also had to abide by something called the Fairness Doctrine, which required them to air diverse viewpoints on controversial issues. Separately, during election campaigns, broadcasters had to abide by the equal time rule, which required them to provide equal airtime to rival candidates in any election. But the biggest way that they proved that they were providing a public service and meeting the requirements of the Fairness Doctrine was by broadcasting the news, real news, actual news, local, national, and international news produced by professional old-school journalists. Because the news didn't draw huge ratings like entertainment shows, although tens of millions of Americans did watch it every night on TV and listen to it at the top of every hour on radio from coast to coast. And because real news was expensive to produce, with bureaus and correspondents all over the world, news was a money loser for all of the big three TV networks and for most local and radio and national radio and TV stations. But it was such a sacred thing. This was, after all, the keystone that held together the station's license to broadcast and thus to do business. It didn't matter if it lost money. It made all the other money-making things possible. Through much of the early 1970s, I worked in the newsroom of a radio station in Lansing, Michigan. It had been started and was then run by three local guys, an engineer, a salesman, and a radio broadcaster. They split up the responsibilities like you expect, and all were around the building most days and would hang out from time to time with the on-air crew, all except the sales guy. I was forbidden from talking with him because I worked in news. There could be no hint, ever, anywhere, that our radio station had violated the FCC's programming in the public interest mandate by, for example, by going easy on an advertiser in a news story or promoting another advertiser in a different story. News had to be news, separate from profits and revenue. And if it wasn't, I'd be fired on the spot. News, in other words, wasn't part of the free market. It was part of our nation's intellectual commons, and thus the price of the station's license. After Reagan blew up the Fairness Doctrine in 1987, two very interesting things happened. The first was the rise of right-wing hate speech talk radio, starting with Rush Limbaugh that very year. The second, which really stepped up after President Bill Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act of '96, was that the money-losing news divisions of the big three television networks were taken under the wings of their entertainment divisions and wrung dry. Foreign bureaus were closed, reporters were fired, stories that promoted the wonders of advertisers owned by the same mega corporations began to appear, and investigative journalism began to die. It's the Thom Hartmann Reader.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. So, Bernie Sanders today introduced a resolution in the United States Senate that says that, first of all, the Senate formally agrees with the intelligence community's assessment that Russia interfered in American and foreign elections, and that the Senate would also resolve to, quote, move aggressively to protect our election systems from interference by Russia or any foreign power. and that this must be, quote, fully implemented by the president, end of quote. Rand Paul objects, saying, this is crazy hatred of the president. This is crazy partisanship driving this. So, let me get this straight. Bernie says, let's secure our election systems. Rand Paul says that's crazy partisanship. Over in the House of Representatives, they're trying to pass legislation to fund these grants that through 2019, pass legislation to fund these grants that would help the states secure their election systems. This is from today's Washington Post. The headline, it's by Erica Werner. The headline, House GOP refuses to renew election security funding as Democrats fume over Russian interference. Kind of tells the whole story, right? House Republicans plan to vote Thursday on a spending bill that excludes new money for election security grants to the states. Democrats want to continue grant funding through 2019. Well, that's pretty strange, but then the level of strange amps up considerably. Yesterday, or perhaps it was the day before, Donald Trump, in an interview with CBS News, said he was talking about James Clapper, who was the former head of the CIA, as I recall. He might have also been DNI, but he was the head of the CIA. He says, Clapper wrote me a beautiful letter when I first went to office, and it was really nice. And then all of a sudden, he's gone haywire. This is Donald Trump speaking. All of a sudden, he's gone haywire because they got to him. And they probably got him to say things that maybe he doesn't even mean. End of quote from Donald Trump. So who is they? Well, Michael Scheuer over at non-intervention.com, his blog, and Michael Scheuer has been a guest on this program a number of times. Back during the Bush years, he wrote books about, he's a former CIA guy, and he wrote books about Osama bin Laden and how when he was on our program, as I recall, it was, his concerns that the Bush administration was overreaching in their reaction to 9/11 and basically diminishing the rights of Americans. A position, by the way, with which I largely agreed, which is why he was on the program. So I haven't talked to Michael in, I don't know how long. 6, 8 years, 10 years, something like that. But his blog today is interesting and troubling and may help us answer that question. Who is this they that Donald Trump is talking about? Because I think that Michael is reflecting, in this one blog is distilled a lot of the stuff that you will find at Breitbart and on Fox so-called news and on Right-Wing Hate Radio and over at Alex Jones's InfoWars site and whatnot. So Michael Scheuer writes, as this week's end, I think he means at this week's end. This is from July 14th, so this is like from 5 days ago. It seems likely that it is quite near time for killing those involved in the multiple and clearly delineated attempts to stage a coup d'etat against the legitimately elected Trump government and thereby kill our republic. So his opening sentence is, it's time to start killing people, or it's quite near time for killing people. He writes, this week saw the alternative media, I'm assuming that's his phrase for what we refer to as the mainstream media, the corporate media, document nearly 300 incidents of violence against loyal U.S. citizens that have been perpetrated by Democrats and the domestic terrorists that the party and its financial supporters keep on their payrolls. Are we figuring out who they is yet? The week saw FBI agent Strzok brazenly lie to Congress, show his own detestation for everyday Americans, it's their smell, he says, and display facial and other physical quirks that appeared very reminiscent of a demented beaver, a drug addict, or a loyal Democrat. So we're filling in the blanks on they. The week saw on Friday the 13th, Special Counsel Mueller and his Democratic apparatchik lawyers indict 12 supposed Russian intelligence officers with a laughable amount of evidence pertaining to their purported involvement in the 2016 election. And he suggests that Mueller is doing this to screw up Trump's opportunity to meet with Putin. He says, finally this week, and he's got this bill of grievance, sort of like the Declaration of Independence did. They did this, and then they did this, and then they did this. He says, finally this week saw a significant and quickening advance toward the moment when those millions... Now, let me just pause this right here. Kristallnacht was over a decade in the making in Germany. The hard right in Germany that eventually came to be known as the National Socialist Party had been arguing for some time that there was a they among the German people, specifically the Jews. And Kristallnacht was the night that the volunteers, right, the well-armed citizenry of Germany. This was not the government of Germany that did this. This was average Germans went into the streets and smashed the windows of Jewish-owned stores. Back to Michael Scheuer. He said, finally this week saw a significant and quickening advance toward the moment when those millions of well-armed citizens who voted for Trump and who have been abused or wounded by Democrats, their Antifa thugs, and their thug civil servants for exercising their franchise to elect Trump cannot, in good conscience, patient for much longer, or be patient for much longer. Fortunately, they have in hand a long and very precise list, they being those well-armed citizens who voted for Trump. Fortunately, they have in hand a long and very precise list of the names and photographs of those who hate and threaten them, their families, their way of life, their liberty, their livelihoods, and their republic. No self-respecting and determined to remain independent citizenry can let themselves forever be held hostage by thug civil servants like Strzok, Comey, McCabe, Page, and Rosenstein. Worshippers of tyranny like the Democratic members of Congress. I have to hand it to Michael. He says Democratic. He doesn't use the Democrat thing from Joe McCarthy. The Clintons, the FBI, and the Obamas, apparent traitors like Brennan, Hayden, and Clapper, all of the mainstream media, and the tens of thousands of government-admitted and protected violent, criminal, and illegal immigrants. And he wraps up his rant. And as I said, you can read this over at non-intervention.com, Michael's blog. And I'm not attacking Michael. I'm pointing out here that this is the thinking that is going on that I think is leading to Trump saying they got to Clapper. He said, American patriots have so far, praise God, been remarkably disciplined in not responding to tyranny and violence with violence. For now, they must remain so, armed but steady. But the time for such patience is fast slipping away. Indeed, that patience is quickly becoming an obviously rank and self-destructive foolishness. If Trump does not act soon to erase the above-noted tyranny and tyrants, the armed citizenry must step in and eliminate them. It is, of course, far better if Trump does so, and I pray and believe he will, Michael writes. That said, the sheer, nay, utter joy and satisfaction to be derived from beholding great piles of dead U.S. citizen tyrants is not one that will be missed if Trump does not soon do the necessary to save the republic. But if he fails, the citizenry must act to ensure that Hillary's predictive words are proven correct. If Trump wins, she apparently said, we will all hang. I know of no evidence that Hillary ever said that, which I think is why Michael said apparently. And there's some interesting comments to it. But, you know, setting aside, well, I don't know what you can set aside here, but let me make this clear. You can go on the internet and you can just read these sites, and what you will discover is that this is not unique to Michael's site. And these kinds of calls to action, these calls to violence. Who is the they that Donald Trump says got to Clapper? And what is this leading us to now? What do we do with this? I'm talking in a practical way as people living in a democratic republic. Democrats whose suggestion is, gee, maybe we should join the other 33 countries in the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD countries. Why don't we join the other 33 countries and have a national health care system? Why don't we regulate the banks? Why don't we stop dumping poison into our air and water? And for these calls, these Democrats are called communists and socialists and enemies of the people. To say we should secure our election systems? Rand Paul says that this is hatred of the president, to say we should lock down our election systems? Is this a case of the ends justify the means? I mean, the Republicans seem to like rigged elections, right? Whether they're rigged by the Russians or whether they're rigged by Debo.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Which is not to say that Diebold is necessarily rigging elections, but they may be putting out equipment that makes it relatively easy. Welcome back. So, this Mark Sumner over at the Daily Kos. The headline, Donald Trump won't call Putin a liar, but he has plenty of names for U.S. intelligence officials. And this is, from the CBS anchor Jeff Glor's interview with Donald Trump yesterday or the day before, Wednesday evening, last night. Glor, he's talking about Putin. He says, but he denies it. So if you believe U.S. intelligence agencies, is Putin lying to you? And Trump replies, I don't want to get into whether or not he's lying. I can only say I do have confidence in our intelligence agencies as currently constituted. Now, as currently constituted presumably means that he's gotten rid of those people that Michael was just pointing out. John Brennan and Andrew McCabe and Jim Comey and James Clapper and Michael Hayden and, of course, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. And then we go to Trump. He continues. He says, Clapper wrote me a beautiful letter when I first went to office, and it was really nice, and then all of a sudden he's gone haywire because they got to him, and they probably got him to say things that maybe he didn't even mean. They being the liberals? I don't think that this is about, democratic plans for a national health care system. Although maybe it is. I mean, there are right-wing billionaires who believe that that is the first step to fascism, to communism, to, the worst isms. You have the state of Georgia right now, which has totally insecure election systems, no paper trail, they're unauditable. They're all entirely touchscreen, the entire state. And the state is resisting a lawsuit by Democrats to simply demonstrate that their system is secure and to take federal money to secure the system. And the Republicans who run Georgia are saying, hey, this system is just fine with us. It keeps electing Republicans. I mean, what do you do when you've got a political party that seems to be the recipient, the beneficiary of this kind of stuff? And they go, oh, hey, it's just fine with us. It's not a big deal. We're not concerned about election security. We keep winning the elections. You know, in those states where you've got good election security, like Oregon and Washington State, where it's entirely mail-in, every single ballot is a paper ballot. You learn that you're not on the voting rolls when your ballot doesn't arrive in the mail, which gives you plenty of time to call them up and say, hey, what the heck happened? Did I get purged? And when your ballot doesn't arrive in the mail, then you know, right? And you still have weeks to get one and send it in here in Oregon and in Washington State. And, you know, they look at that and they go, yeah, and Democrats keep winning in Washington and Oregon State, or Washington State and Oregon. I don't know. This is a conundrum. We'll be back. It's 22 and a half minutes past the hour. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by XChair, the XChair chair, office chair. XChairTom.com is the website, XChairTHOM.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by SuperBeets. More information is available over at TomsBeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Tom, THOM. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So what's going on here? We've got a political party. You know, down in Georgia, the Democrats are suing the Secretary of State and saying you should take the federal money to make the Georgia election system more secure. Because Georgia is one of 5 states in which there is no paper trail, there are no paper ballots, everything is done on touch screens, and it's just wildly insecure. And there's a pretty good-sized body of evidence to suggest that since 2002, 2004, elections have not been turning out in Georgia the way that the exit polls say they should, which is how we measure election fraud in other countries. And Georgia's saying, we don't need the money. The Republicans today are going to vote on a proposal in the House of Representatives to deny increasing funding for election security to the states. So here you have the Republican Party and Rand Paul saying, hey, any attempt to do so is simply proof that you hate the president. So you've got a political party that's apparently more than happy to take help in acquiring power from cranky right-wing billionaires. They're more than American billionaires. They're apparently more than willing to take help from cranky foreign autocrats. In this case, at the very least, Mr. Putin and possibly others. Which, by the way, the Democrats are acknowledging. They're saying, we need to lock down our systems to protect them from Russia and anybody else who wants to hack them. And I'm assuming that the Russians are saying, hey, we need to lock down our systems to keep the Americans out. I mean, this is just common sense. But you've got a party that's saying basically the ends justify the means. The religious right has been, this was their argument for Donald Trump. He may be a bigot, he may be a misanthrope, he may be Messiah, he may hate women, he may grab women by the crotch, he may sleep with porn stars, he may, party with hookers, but he's going to keep our tax-exempt status intact and let us involve ourselves in the political arena so that we can increase our personal power and wealth. This is essentially what the religious right is saying. It's the deal that they've cut. The ends justify the means. And now the Republicans are saying this, and in the background, we have these voices on the far right fringe, I would say, who are saying, is it time to start killing people yet? We'll be delighted to see piles of bodies of these people being Democrats. Really? Is this where we're at as a country? What do we do with this? Your calls after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's 28 minutes past the hour. We'll be back. We're reading today from Jason Stanley's book, How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them. This is from chapter 1. It is only natural to begin this book where fascist politics invariably claims to discover its genesis in the past. Fascist politics invokes a pure mythic past tragically destroyed. Depending on how the nation is defined, the mythic past may be religiously pure, racially pure, culturally pure, or all of the above. But there's a common structure to all fascist mythologizing. In all fascist mythic pasts, an extreme version of the patriarchal family reigns supreme, even just a few generations ago. Further back in time, the mythic past was a time of glory of the nation, with wars of conquest led by patriotic generals, its armies filled with its countrymen, able-bodied, loyal warriors whose wives were at home raising the next generation. In the present, these myths become the basis of the nation's identity under fascist politics. In the rhetoric of extreme nationalists, such a glorious past has been lost by the humiliation brought on by globalism, liberal cosmopolitanism, and respect for universal values such as equality. These values are supposed to have made the nation weak in the face of real and threatening challenges to the nation's existence. These myths are generally based on fantasies of a non-existent past uniformity, which survives in the traditions of the small towns and countrysides that remain relatively unpolluted by the liberal decadence of the cities. This uniformity, linguistic, religious, geographical, or ethnic, can be perfectly ordinary in some nationalist movements, but fascist myths distinguish themselves with the creation of a glorious national history in which the members of the chosen nation ruled over others, the result of conquests and civilization-building achievements. For example, in the fascist imagination, the past invariably involves traditional patriarchal gender roles. The fascist mythic past has a particular structure which supports its authoritarian hierarchical ideology. That past societies were rarely as patriarchal, or indeed as glorious, as fascist ideology represent them is beside the point. This imagined history provides proof to support the imposition of hierarchy in the present, and it dictates how contemporary society should look and behave. In a 1922 speech at the Fascist Congress in Naples, Benito Mussolini declared, "We have created our myth. The myth is a faith, a passion. It is not necessary for it to be a reality. Our myth is the nation. Our myth is the greatness of the nation. And to this myth, this greatness, which we want to translate into a total reality, we subordinate everything." Here, Mussolini makes clear that the fascist mythic past is intentionally mythical. The function of the mythic past in fascist politics is to harness the emotion of nostalgia to the central tenets of fascist ideology: authoritarianism, hierarchy, purity, and struggle. With the creation of a mythic past, fascist politics creates a link between nostalgia and the realization of fascist ideals. German fascists also clearly and explicitly appreciated this point about the strategic use of a mythological past. The leading Nazi ideologue, Alfred Rosenberg, editor of the prominent Nazi newspaper, the Völkischer Beobachter, writes in 1924, "The understanding of and the respect for our own mythological past and our own history will form the first condition for more firmly anchoring the coming generation in the soil of Europe's original homeland. The fascist mythic past exists to aid in changing the present. The patriarchal family is one ideal that fascist politicians intend to create in society, or return to, as they claim. The patriarchal family is always represented as a central part of the nation's traditions, diminished even recently by the advent of liberalism and cosmopolitanism. But why is patriarchy so strategically central to fascist politics? In a fascist society, the leader of the nation is analogous to the father in the traditional patriarchal family. The leader is the father of his nation, and his strength and power are the source of his legal authority, just as the strength and power of the father in the family in patriarchy are supposed to be the source of his ultimate moral authority over his children and wife. The leader provides for his nation, just as in the traditional family, the father is the provider. The patriarchal father's authority derives from his strength, and strength is the chief authoritarian value. By representing the nation's past as one with a patriarchal family structure, fascist politics connects nostalgia to a central organizing hierarchical authoritarian structure, one that finds its purest representation in these norms. Gregor Strasser of the National Socialist Nazi Reich was the National Socialist Nazi Reich propaganda chief in the 1920s before the post was taken over by Joseph Goebbels. According to Strasser, for a man, military service is the most profound and valuable form of participation. For the woman, it is motherhood. Paula Seiber, the acting head of the Association of German Women, in a 1933 document meant to reflect official National Socialist state policy on women, declares that to be a woman means to be a mother, means affirming that the whole conscious force of one's soul, the value of being a mother and making it a law of life, the highest calling, not just to bear children, but total devotion to her role. And Michael Arpert's website, by the way, or Michael Scheuer's website, excuse me, is non-intervention.com. And thank you. So just FYI. And Republicans block the effort. This is pretty remarkable. This morning, the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell, who are the two most senior Democrats on the committee, moved to request to subpoena the translator that was in the room with Trump and Putin. And every single Republican on the committee voted no. Every single Republican voted no. What is going on here? Mark in Valley, Washington. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind?
Yeah, how you doing, Tom?
Good.
I've had this discussion with you with citizens owning AR-15s before, but what's going on right now, I surmise to you that we best rethink that, because I'll guarantee a large percentage of the Trump supporters are armed with equivalent-type weapons. And I got a funny feeling that there's going to be clashes in the streets with these people because the Republicans aren't doing anything.
Yeah, this is really, really dangerous stuff, Mark. The goal here is not to start a war. The goal here is to have a functioning republic. And I mean, basically what you're saying is a call to arms. And I can't go there. I won't go there.
Well, they are.
I know they are.
So you better be prepared. I'm not saying that we got to start it. I'm saying be prepared.
I think this is, just like Scheuer is saying that he hopes that Trump deals with all these Democrats by presumably, locking them out. He's talking about piles of dead bodies and stuff. I mean, this is kind of the Hitler, strategy, whatever. I am hopeful that the high integrity, or the portions of our government which still retain some integrity, which would be the intelligence agencies, the FBI, the police departments and whatnot, will protect us, because that's their job. That's why we created this government. And, I get your concern, Mark, but, That is not the solution. I'm telling you, that's not the solution. Michael in Imperial, California. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Mr. Hartman. That article by Markel Schauer is just terrifying, and I want to point out one hypocrisy of it. Okay, so are the people Michael Schauer is trying to incite actually willing to murder, quote, millions of Americans, as he suggested, even if they are their own mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, and even their own living children? So here's the hypocrisy.
See, that's the reminder we need, Michael, is that we're all people here. Including Michael and his friends who feel so aggrieved by Democrats. Back to you.
I agree. But here's the hypocrisy. So these people who say that abortion is wrong, just because their child who is now living believes against Donald Trump, they're willing to murder their own child who's actually living? Yeah. I just find that so hypocritical. It's not even funny, and this is scary stuff.
Some of them, they have demonstrated a willingness to use violence. They, Heather, what's her name? Heather Heyer was murdered in Charlottesville. Several abortion doctors have been murdered over the years. I mean, these Tim McVeigh, killed hundreds of people in Oklahoma City. It turns out that the shooter in Las Vegas was a right-wing conspiracy guy. He thought it was time to bring on the revolution. I mean, it's not. This is not. And he killed a whole bunch of people and wounded over 500 of them. In fact, I think it's in the neighborhood of 1,000 now because the hotel is suing them to try to avoid liability itself. So it's yeah. Sean in Kennewaw, New Jersey. Hey, Sean, what's up?
Hi, Tom. When does it come? When does it get to the point where this type of language and this type of writing goes beyond this argument, well, free speech? I'm sorry, the First Amendment does not protect somebody inciting a riot in this country, calling for the execution of people that disagree with you in this country is inciting a riot. And when do we get to the point where these people who publish these this type of writing can be arrested and prosecuted? This is inciting a riot. It's inciting violence, and it's a really scary time in our history where our nation is almost at the point of where we could have a civil war if this kind of stuff is taken seriously.
Yeah, and it is being taken seriously by people. I mean, look at the guy who showed up at the pizza parlor in Washington D.C. with a rifle and started shooting because he thought that Hillary Clinton was running a sex ring out of a basement that the building didn't even have a basement, by the way. Much less Hillary Clinton running a sex ring, child sex ring. But yeah, I mean, this is where, and that again was a story that started in these same right-wing fringe areas like Alex Jones's site and whatnot, and this is where it ends up. I mean, fortunately, that guy didn't kill anybody, but this is scary stuff. Sean, I agree with you, and I think that this is where we need to have strong institutions that have strong. We have to have essentially these quasi-military institutions, which are the police and the FBI, that have strong civilian oversight by elected officials. And when the Republicans refuse to even, subpoena maybe we're conflating issues here. But when the Republicans refuse to have funding to secure elections in the United States, because, gee, that just seems to be working out just fine for us after all, So what if the exit polls in Georgia consistently show Democrats winning, but the election results from the voting machines with no paper trail and unauditable always show Republicans? Hey, we like that. So what if the Russians hacked an election? We like that. So what if the Chinese helped out? We like that. So what if, fill in the blank, Saudi Arabia, Israel, some other country is funneling money into the United States to influence our elections through lobbying groups or front groups or whatever it may be. As long as it keeps us in power, it's all good. There is a point at which I think that we all have to realize that the ends justifies the means is not a healthy direction to be going. And by the way, we'll be talking about that at some length with Jeff Charlotte in the third hour of our program today. He wrote the book, The Family, and we're going to get back to that in the National Prayer Breakfast. Rich in Greenwood, Indiana. Hey, Rich, what's up?
I just heard that title and that author the other day, Charlotte's family.
Yeah.
They're the ones that did the prayer breakfast from way back in 1930s. Anyway, I wanted to bring attention to a potential resource from way back in 2008. When I first found Free Speech TV, there was a little documentary that was in rotation called Free for All. Free for All 2008, directed and written by John Ennis, E-N-N-I-S. And he puts forward a theory and then gets factual information to fill in blanks about it, that it was specifically in Ohio, and it was something crafted through Karl Rove and Dick Cheney, and it was these one-issue voters that were anti-choice and combating Roe v. Wade. They're heavily Catholic and, true believers, and they decided to wade in and cheat by goosing the machine code.
Mm-hmm.
They went after the votes with software, and as you have talked about before, there are flash drives that can infect a machine. And this was way back in 2008, looking at a previous state of Ohio's Secretary of State, Ken Blackwell.
Yeah, this was looking at the 2004 election. I remember this,
okay.
Rich.
Okay, well,
so your point.
I think that there's something to be said there.
Yeah.
And if you could please also look to the works that Stetson Kennedy did. He's the guy that wrote that book, I Rode with the Ku Klux Klan. He was the infiltrator, and he got the Superman radio program to take on the Klan and be this informative, aren't these people incredibly stupid and foolish, and had their public support withdraw.
Yeah, Rich, I'll have to look into it. Thanks for the suggestion. Judith in Chandler, Arizona. Hey, Judith, what's on your mind?
Hi there, Tom. My thoughts about this, because it all is terrifying, to say the least. And both of them, I'm afraid, are pretty grim. I don't think these people are going to go away. I don't think, I guess back step, we need to see what happens in the midterms. If the Democrats take the House, then there might be some hope. But these people are not going to go away. They're true believers. And I've long felt that the country needs to split because we've never really been united to begin with. And barring that, since this country, fortunately, for so long, has managed to escape the mayhem that happened in Europe over hundreds of years, we've never been through that, so we haven't had that experience.
Outside of the Civil War, yeah.
Well, we had the Civil War, which unfortunately I think should have ended with our splitting, but did not. Yeah,
that's been Louise's theory all along, is that Lincoln's biggest mistake was he didn't say, "Okay, see you guys later."
Yeah, I think the Democrats need to say, "See you guys later," because I don't think we can get the Republicans to go along. I don't think we can get that part of the country to go along. They never have. They never will. They want to have their own country.
But I think, Judith, without a hardcore right-wing infrastructure funded in large part by right-wing billionaires whose real goal is financial, to protect their oil industry and empire, I don't think much of this stuff would be happening. I don't think much of this stuff would be going on.
I agree with that.
And Putin is an oilocrat too. Judith, I'm sorry, we're hitting the break. We gotta go.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls and the news of the day in just a moment. And welcome back. Paul in New York City. Hey, Paul. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
How are you, Tom?
Great. What's up?
I got a question for you. Once we have this wave election and we put Nancy Pelosi in as president, who do you think we should get as a U.S. Attorney General to come in there and clean up, K Street, all the lobbyists, and get Wall Street and get those oligarchs like the Koch brothers, who you know are committing crimes behind the scenes, just like Paul Manafort, just like Michael Cohen. Who do you think we should get? I mean, I do not want an Eric Holder or Loretta Lynch. They're too weak. And Mike Papantonio, as much as I like him, he's not disciplined. He's all over the place.
Paul, where you and I disagree, and what I would suggest is the logical flaw in your question is the implicit question behind your question, which is who will save us. And I'm not a salvationist. I don't think that there's anybody out there who's going to save us. I think that we need to save ourselves. And the kinds of change that you're talking about, that kind of change is the kind of change that happened very rapidly in this country in the early 1930s when FDR became president. It happened very rapidly in this country in 1901 when Teddy Roosevelt became president. And it happened very slowly in the 1980s when Reagan became president. And what we're seeing right now is the culmination of this 30-year-long building of a conservative coalition, in quotes, of the anti-abortion people, the fundamentalist Christians, the gun people, bringing all these people together, the bigots, the haters, bringing them all together into one group and saying, okay, this is our group. We call ourselves the Republican Party. And I think that the answer to this is not to say, gee, we need to get the perfect attorney general, or we need to get the perfect president, or whatever. The answer to this is to awaken the American people to what's actually going on, which is why I shared Michael's blog post with you, and to get the American people involved. I mean, the last midterm election 8 years ago, or 4 years ago, we had 36% of Americans showed up to vote, or something like that. I mean, it was crazy, and so. That's my take on it, Paul. I'm concerned with the predicating assumption of your question. Am I making sense to you?
You're making a little sense. I just feel that people like the Koch brothers are committing crimes, and they need to be held accountable.
I don't think they're committing crimes. I mean, A, they've got a lot of lawyers. B, they're smart guys. What they're doing is legal. The problem is that the Supreme Court made it legal. It used to be illegal. I mean, after Nixon. I mean, in 1905, the Tillman Act was passed, which said that no corporation could contribute money or any kind of material support to any federal candidate for election. That was 1905. That got wiped off the books in 2010, in October of 2010, when Citizens United was handed down by the Supreme Court.
That's tough. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Paul. So, what I'm saying is we've got, I don't see the Koch brothers as criminals. I don't see Michael, what's his name, Scheuer, as essentially a bad guy. I think that, we need to have some real information out here. We've got a news media that's turned into infotainment all the time, and, so you can pick, do you want right-wing infotainment or do you want left-wing infotainment? But massive amounts of what's actually going on are being deleted on both sides. And the stuff down the middle, you tune in the big network news and you get stories about kids rescuing puppies. I mean, it's, again, we're not well informed. We'll be back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. XChairTom.com is the website, XChairTHOM.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Superbeats. More information is available over at tomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Tom, THOM. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So what do we do with this information? Where do we go from here? Bill in Missouri. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind?
Oh, hang on.
I'm here, Bill. What's up?
Yeah, I got get you on speaker. My phone. God.
Yeah, okay. Bill, sorry. We'll call back. Jay in Chicago. Hey, Jay, thanks for listening to Chicago's Progressive Talk. What's up?
Hey, Tom, man. Hey, I was just on my lunch break, and I was hearing on the news that the Republicans decided to not fund a bill to make our elections more secure.
That's correct.
Kind of mind-boggling. Well, how is that?
They also unanimously in the House of Representatives in the Intelligence Committee, unanimously the Republicans voted to not subpoena the translator who was in the room with Trump and Putin.
Well, how do we get around that? I know. Obviously, voting in the the elections coming up, we can kind of turn some of that stuff around. But how is it that the American people don't understand or don't see what's kind of happening here? And my opinion would be that the Republicans are most of them are perfectly fine with this situation. Like how is election security a partisan issue?
Yeah. FDR's vice president pointed out that in the New York Times, and you've heard me read this many times, that the American fascist is a deliberate poisoner of the channels of information. Well, that assumed, Henry Wallace was assuming a certain amount of malice there. I'm not even assuming malice. We have reinvented the system by which we deliver news to people. We did this with, by and large, with the Telecommunications Act of 1996, but also with Ronald Reagan undoing the Fairness Doctrine in 1987. And as a consequence of that, we no longer are a well-informed populace. We no longer, get good, solid news. And even the agencies that we turn to that we think of as nonprofit, like National Public Radio, are now being funded by right-wing groups to the point where they're regularly putting on people from the Heritage Foundation and the American Enterprise Institute and these other right-wing front groups for billionaire interests. And so, we're not getting good, clean information anywhere because there's no longer an obligation by law to broadcast in the public interest. And so people are whether it's left-wing infotainment or whether it's right-wing infotainment, we're getting infotainment rather than news. And these news agencies, including the cable companies, they pick 5 or 6 of the top stories that will bounce in terms of viewership, that will attract eyeballs and thus raise advertising rates and thus make more money for the network. They hit those 5 or 6 stories and they repeat them over and over and over, hour after hour after hour, all day long. And massive amounts of what's going on get deleted and just get ignored, get overlooked. And people are not well informed in this country, and it's a tragedy. But we've got to address this. We've got to figure out how to get past this and through this, and so that we're all sharing basically a common database of information. Jay, thanks for the call. I mean, these are tough questions. John in Medford, Oregon. Hey, John, what's up?
Hey, I just wanted to point out that a recent poll that came out today said that 8 out of 10 Republicans support the way that Trump handled that press conference with Putin. Right. And I think that's clear evidence that that the Republican Party has basically lost its mind. And I think that we Democrats really need to figure out whether we're ever going to be able to get along with Republicans.
See, I disagree. I know some of those people who probably were, in that poll. And the problem isn't that they've lost their mind. It's not that they're crazy, and it's certainly not that they're stupid. It's that they're watching Fox News and they're listening to right-wing hate radio. They're reading websites like Breitbart. They are the information that is being delivered to them is deliberately poisoning their minds on behalf of billionaire oligarchs like Rupert Murdoch, who is protecting his fellow billionaire oligarch Donald Trump.
I don't disagree with any of that. When I say that they've lost their mind, that's just a short way of saying what you just said. I guess the question is, what are we going to do about it? Because, at this point, how many more elections do we get to get stolen from us?
Yeah.
What is it? 7 out of the last 8 presidential elections, going back to 1992, we've gotten more votes than the other side.
6 out of the last 7 presidential elections, yes.
Yeah, I think it's something like that, and yet at the same time, 2 of those times, our guy wasn't in the presidency, and consequently, we've got Neil Gorsuch up there. How many, and for that matter, now that I think of it regularly, we get more Democrats vote for, or more candidates.
The Democrats in the House of Representatives represent over 55% of the American people. The Democrats in the United States Senate represent over 65% of the American people. And yet they're both in minorities. And that's because of gerrymandering and because of the small state, big state thing. So, yeah, John, go quickly,
John. That's what I was just trying to say. That's just what I was trying to say. How many times do we take it in the short?
Well, we just, we can't, we had 3 million fewer people show up in the last election than voted in the Obama election on the Democratic side. Let's start there.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beats. More information is available over at thomsbeats.com, thomsbeets.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Thom, Thom. Neil Howe, and this book was published, I believe, in the late 90s, just FYI. 1998. America feels like it's unraveling. Though we live in an era of relative peace and comfort, we have settled into a mood of pessimism about the long-term future, fearful that our superpower nation is somehow rotting from within. Neither an epic victory nor over communism nor an extended upswing of the business cycle can buoy our public spirit. The Cold War and the New Deal struggles are plainly over, but we are of no mind to bask in their successes. The America of today feels worse in its fundamentals than the one many of us remember from our youth, a society presided over by those of supposedly lesser consciousness. Wherever we look, from L.A. to D.C., from Oklahoma City to Sun City, we see paths to a foreboding future. We yearn for civic character, but satisfy ourselves with symbolic gestures and celebrity circuses. We perceive no greatness in our leaders, a new meanness in ourselves. Small wonder that each new election brings a new jolt, its aftermath, a new disappointment. I'd add this was at the height of the Newt Gingrich and impeachment and all that kind of craziness. Not long ago, America, which is the predecessor, has really set up Donald Trump. Not long ago, America was more than the sum of its parts. Now it is less. Around World War II, we were proud as a people, but modest as individuals. Fewer than 2 people in 10 said yes when asked, "Are you a very important person?" Today, more than 6 in 10 say yes. Where we once thought ourselves collectively strong, we now regard ourselves as individually entitled. Yet even while we exalt our own personal growth, we realize that millions of self-actualized persons don't add up to an actualized society. Popular trust in virtually every American institution, from business and governments to churches and newspapers, keeps falling to new lows. Public debts soar, the middle class shrinks, welfare dependencies deepen, and cultural arguments worsen by the year. We now have the highest incarceration rate and the lowest eligible voter participation rate of any major democracy in the world. Statistics inform us that many adverse trends, crime, divorce, abortion, scholastic aptitudes, may have bottomed out, but we're not reassured. Optimism still attaches to self, but no longer to family or community. This is the consequence of Reaganism. Most Americans express more hope for their own prospects than for their children's or the nation's. Parents widely fear that the American dream, which was there solidly for their parents and still there barely for them, will not be there for their kids. Young householders are reaching their mid-30s, never having known a time when America seemed to be on the right track. Middle-aged people look at their thin savings accounts and slim-to-none pensions, scoff at an illusory Social Security trust fund, and try not to dwell on what a burden their old age could become. Seniors separate into their own leisure world, recoiling at the lost virtue of youth while trying not to think about the future. We perceive our civic challenge as some vast, insoluble Rubik's Cube. Behind each problem lies another problem that must be solved first, and behind that lies another and another ad infinitum. To fix crime, we have to fix the family, but before we do that, we have to fix welfare, and that means fixing our budget, and that means fixing our civic spirit, but we can't do that without fixing moral standards, and that means fixing our schools and churches, and that means fixing the inner cities, and that's impossible unless we fix crime. There's no fulcrum upon which to rest a policy lever. People of all ages sense that something huge will have to sweep across America before the gloom can be lifted. But that's an awareness we suppress. As a nation, we're in deep denial. While we grope for answers, we wonder if analysis may be crowding out our intuition. The reward of the historian is to locate patterns that recur over time and to discover the natural rhythms of social experience. In fact, at the core of modern history lies this remarkable pattern. Over the past 5 centuries, Anglo-American society has entered a new era, a new turning, every 2 decades or so. At the start of each turning, people change how they feel about themselves, the culture, the nation, and the future. Turnings come in cycles of 4. Each cycle spans the length of a long human life, roughly 80 to 100 years, a unit of time the ancients called seculum. Together, the 4 turnings of the seculum comprise history's seasonal rhythm of growth, maturation, entropy, and destruction. The first turning is a high, an upbeat era of strengthening institutions and weakening individualism, where a new civic order implants and the old values regime decays. The second turning is an awakening, a passionate era of spiritual upheaval when the civic order comes under attack from a new values regime. The third turning is an unraveling, a downcast era of strengthening individualism and weakening institutions when the old civic order decays and the new values regime implants. And the fourth turning is a crisis, a decisive era of secular upheaval when the values regime propels the replacement of the old civic order with a new one. Each turning comes with its own identifiable mood. Always these mood shifts catch people by surprise. In the current seculum, the first turning was the American high of the Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy presidencies. As World War II wound down, no one predicted that America would soon become so confident and institutionally muscular, yet so conformist and spiritually complacent. But that's what's happened. The second turning was the consciousness revolution, stretching from the campus revolts of the mid-'60s to the tax revolts of the early '80s. Before John Kennedy was assassinated, no one predicted that America was about to enter an era of personal liberation and cross a cultural divide that would separate anything thought or said after from anything thought or said before.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us, our old friend, Professor Richard Wolff. He is an economist. He is the co-founder of Democracy at Work. His most recent book, Capitalism's Crisis Deepens, Essays on the Global Economic Meltdown. His website, democracyatwork.info, and, of course, his personal website, rdwolff with 2 Fs.com. well, I'm not sure it's personal. It also, has all that kind of cool stuff on it. Professor Wolf, welcome back.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you with us. I found this article this morning on the Huffington Post and wanted to bounce it off you. It's titled Vienna's Affordable Housing Paradise. And basically it talks about how, well, just to quote from it, today anyone earning up to $53,000 a year after taxes is eligible to apply for a subsidized apartment in Vienna. And this is a country where the annual the median gross annual income is only $31,000. So, if you're earning under about twice the average income, you qualify for discounted housing. The average income in the United States is in the 40s, as I recall. So this would be anyone earning under $80,000 would get subsidized housing in the United States. 62% of Vienna's citizens currently live in what they call social housing, compared to 1% of America's population. What does this mean? And what does it mean about how societies can be organized to create middle classes, how it may be that a middle class doesn't just naturally emerge? It's, in fact, in a totally laissez-faire state, you would have very little middle class, that it has to be crafted essentially by government, sir.
Well, it's interesting. I have been to Vienna. I have visited friends and associates who live in the social housing units that they have all over the city. You wouldn't know that you were in public housing. That is, if you come from the United States, your image of public housing is somewhere between horrible and disastrous in most cases. There are a few exceptions, but mostly it's very poor people, and these things are not very well maintained. So when you arrive at the social housing in Vienna, you don't imagine, unless someone explains it to you, that these wonderfully landscaped, spick and span, clean, comfortable, roomy apartments are social housing. So let's inquire. Back in the 1920s, when socialists were the government in Austria, they committed to building mass quality public housing. The logic in their minds, which Americans I think can understand, is that housing is as important in its way as education is. So if you're going to create a public school system rather than letting everybody get to school if they can afford it, if you're going to have a public education system to help build your people and a middle class, etc., then you should do the same for housing. And they never looked back. That's why 60%, as you pointed out, or over 60% live in it. By the way, the average percentage paid for rent by these people is around 25, 26% of their income, which is where economists mostly think a decent portion of your income should go for rent, but not beyond that. And by comparison, across the United States, the percentage is much, much higher. So, yes, I think it illustrates beautifully that if you want a society of a middle class, of people who get along with each other, who can live and recreate and have some time off and lead the kind of lives that not only they prefer, but is better for all of those who come in contact with them, then you have to do the kinds of things that Vienna has done. And it has, boy, has it stood the test of time. It's now a 100-year-old experiment, and whether right-wing or left-wing governments have come and gone in Austria, none of them has dared touch this system because it is overwhelmingly supported by the Viennese people.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable stuff. And yet here in the United States, we have billionaire oligarchs who call themselves libertarians, who believe that this is socialism or worse, communism, that it is antithetical to the values of the United States, or at least the values of the billionaire class. They are supported by their fellow billionaire oligarch, Rupert Murdoch, who programs a television network to, with multi-million-dollar stars like Sean Hannity, worth tens of millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars, and pitch to the average schlub, the average guy in America, the average guy and gal in America, that hey, you know, the interests of the billionaires are really your interests. You want to see taxes go down on rich people. You want to see an end to public housing. You want to see an end to food stamps. You want to see an end to programs that, you know, like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid that hold the middle class together. You want to see an end to public education, voucherize and privatize everything. And people are buying this, Professor Wolf.
Yes, and that's why a trip, if you could arrange it, Tom, take Americans randomly chosen to Vienna for a week. I guarantee you they have never seen anything like.
Well, this is what Michael Moore did with his movie Where to Invade Next.
That's right. Literally, you could maybe do it in that way with the wonders of the internet and all the rest, just to give people a sense. I noticed that in this country, I've heard it many times, and most recently from the Housing Secretary Carson, that there is a deliberate effort to keep public housing looking the way it usually does and deteriorated the way it usually is, in order not, in their lovely language, to let people become dependent on help from the government in the form of quality housing. The Viennese experiment, now 100 years old, testifies to the extraordinary quality of life. There's an award given every year in Europe for the most livable city. That includes London, Paris, Berlin, you name it. Vienna wins it hands down, I think 9 out of the last 10 years, because, of course, if you have a mass of people who live in a beautiful home and therefore have enough money because of the low rents to maintain the coffee shops and all the other amenities that make living in a place beautiful, you have a completely different quality of life than the kind of gentrification extremes such as those we have here in New York City, where a 10-minute subway ride can take you to the most richest neighborhood in the world, and then 10 minutes later into the worst poverty you can see in the Western Hemisphere. It's just a completely different way of understanding what collective life in a community could and should be.
And yet the response to that you will get from you know, billionaire Murdoch and his Fox network and the multimillionaire broadcasters on that network, or from multimillionaire Rush Limbaugh or these other guys, is well, yeah, of course, you're going to have everybody have decent housing, but that means that you're going to have to raise my taxes. You're going to steal money from me that I earned with the sweat of my brow and the intellect of my mind, and that is rightfully mine. You're talking about the redistribution of wealth. That, sir, is communism.
Yeah, I know. I mean, and I can understand their hysteria. And I would put it this way. They have to whip up whatever crazy notion they can to tap into whatever they can reach in people not to do or to make an experiment of doing what the Viennese did. And the reason they have to go to these strange lengths with these crazy arguments is that they know what Vienna proves. Once the people understood what you can have in the way of a modern society, nobody would ever get them to go back to what we have in this country now.
Well, and this is true of the, you know, out of the 34 richest countries in the world, the 34 OECD nations, 33 of them, including, you know, Canada on the high end of wealth and Costa Rica at the very bottom, have national health care systems. The only one that doesn't is the United States. And, you know, Canada, Tommy Douglas is revered in Canada the way we think of George Washington. He was the, you know, the politician who started that program in Canada in, what was it, Winnipeg, wherever it was, you know, somewhere out west there back in the 60s and or maybe the 50s. And it's like this, you know, they're not going to go back. It's like, well, I would say Americans, you know, they don't want to go back on Social Security and Medicare.
No, because once you get it and you understand the difference it can make, in the case of Social Security, that old people have a sense they will not be a burden on their children, or at least less of one than they might otherwise have been. And young people understand what a better relationship you can have with your elderly relatives if you're not crowding in on an insufficient economic basis. If you could just extend that awareness to make it clear, imagine a health service where an operation wouldn't be the great catastrophe, or a housing that gave you a nice, comfortable place that would allow you to focus on the other parts of your life rather than desperately worrying about where you'll sleep. It's not just a different house. It's a whole different way of life in which you understand we're going to help each other be an effective community rather than accumulate as much as we can and let the chips fall where they may, even though it looks.
But isn't the price? But the price paid for that, Professor Wolf, is that if somebody in Austria has earned $1 billion and wants to turn it into $5 billion, they're going to find it very difficult. And they may be able to turn it into $1.3 billion or $1.6 billion. But, doubling, tripling the way here in the United States, I mean, we saw the Koch brothers just in the last decade or so go from being worth $10 billion to being worth, 80, 90 billion, among others. I mean, and that somehow Americans have it in our heads that billionaires being able to get mind-bogglingly rich, even as the middle class sinks into the mud, is a good thing.
Yeah, they think it until the mud becomes unbearable. Right. Americans are going to have to face that as Mr. Jeffrey Bezos has his $150 billion, which I saw yesterday's headline, of personal wealth, and vast numbers of Americans can't afford to send their kids to get a college education, you're going to see, it'll take time, but you're going to see a recognition that allowing a handful of people, and that's what we're talking about, to become billionaires, while the vast majority of people are struggling in ways we don't need to have them struggle because we have the resources to take care of everybody. In the end, the democratic impulse of what's good for the majority is more important than what's good for the minority will work its way forward.
From your lips to God's ears, sir. Professor Richard Wolff, his most recent book is Capitalism's Crisis Deepens, and his website, Democracy at Work. You can tweet him at Prof. Wolf with 2 Fs. Dr. Wolff, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Tom. Talk to you again soon.
Indeed. Good talking with you. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Dave in New Hartford, Connecticut. Hey, Dave, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Hey, Tom. How's it going?
Good.
Listen, I don't think we have a free media. I think you mentioned that before. I mean, a liberal press. I think our press is very conservative, and I think our press completely built up Trump out of whole cloth. I think that was part of the plan, to get him in there and apply a bit of a shock to the system.
I strongly disagree. I don't think that the media sat around and said, hey, let's get Trump into office and let's have a shock to the system. I think what the media did is they sat around and they said, you've got a bunch of boring politicians here. Jeb Bush really was low energy, Jeb. Right? I mean, you got a bunch of boring politicians talking wonky policy, and then you got this guy who's a TV star and made millions and millions of dollars for NBC, and this guy knows how to draw the camera. He knows how to draw eyeballs. The more we put this guy on TV, the more money we're going to make, and that's the business we're in. We're not in the business of providing people with news. We're in the business of making money. And so they saw Donald Trump coming down the road in the Republican primary, and they said, wow, we will make money with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump knew that going into it. It's how he did it. It's how he exploited everything that's going on. And frankly, he's continuing to do it. But I don't think that they sat around, the NBC. I mean, Les Moonves came right out and said it in an investor call. He said it may be terrible for America, but it's great for CBS.
Yeah, but let's not forget that early on when Sanders was having these rallies where tens of thousands of people were showing up and they completely ignored him, but they were covering Trump when he only had a few hundred people at his rallies. That's kind of where it started. And I think it was very clear that at least, and I understand what you're saying. But I still think that, the corporate media. Let's put that in quote because it is corporate media. The fact that Trump is in there. I mean, they benefit. They're benefiting from his policies. Like there's, it's what they've been. wishing for a long time. So he's passed these tax cuts. He's got that through. He's still getting them. He's still very entertaining, so he's bringing the audiences in. But it's the economic agenda that was the main reason that they were covering him. I think that's the thing you're missing there. I think you're kind of focusing too much on the smoke and mirrors. I think
his economic agenda is one of the things that got him elected, Dave. Trump was running on the traditionally Democratic Party position of tariffs.
But then also, Tom, let's not forget there was also the same media that did not report any of the facts about the WMDs and the lead up to the war in Iraq, and it's the same media that did not report anything about Trump's stiffing of workers, of his fraud, of his pathological lying, of his connections with Russian mafia. That was all out there.
You're right, Dave. And the reality is that the stockholders of CBS and the multimillionaires who run CBS all just got huge tax cuts, and they're probably very, very happy about that. And I'm guessing that one of the reasons that Bernie got very little coverage in the media, throughout the campaign, but particularly in the first 6 months, it was total radio silence, was because Bernie's main message was, I'm going to raise taxes on rich people.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing. I think that, I don't know if you've read Naomi Klein's Shock Doctrine.
I have.
I just kind of read that, and it kind of connects a lot of the dots.
It does.
I think we can't forget that it was also the reason Putin is the leader of Russia, because of our failure to really help Russia out of this time of need. Well,
I gotta bail here, Dave. I'm sorry. Thanks for the call. We'll be right back. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by XChair, the XChair office chair. XChairTom.com is the website, XChairTHOM.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Superbeats. More information is available over at tomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Tom, THOM. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. .com. Welcome back. 24 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. Yep, the Republicans just voted to block subpoenaing the translator in the room with Trump and Putin, so we will never know what the commitments were that Donald Trump made to Putin, other than that President Putin is coming out and saying, or the Russian government is coming out and saying, hey, let's do that stuff that Trump agreed to. And American diplomats are like, what stuff is that? Bill in Missouri. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind?
Hey, yeah, the lady was right that you talked to earlier, and I didn't realize it to a later age that the country has always been split, and that's a shame. Those people are here to stay, and they're in charge now. And like you were talking about, the guy who wrote the article, when do we start killing? If that starts, I've talked to people around the country, some in the military, and I said, would half the military split? And one guy looked at me like surprised. He goes, you're onto it. He goes, yeah. He goes, that's being discussed.
Yeah.
So that's what made, if it gets that serious, if half the military split, because remember Standing Rock when the veterans showed up?
Yeah.
The security backed down.
Yeah, but for a short time, for a few days. But eventually they took out those veterans.
That initial, because the veterans have killed. Some of those veterans have killed before.
Yeah.
And they're not going to. They're ready to do that. I hope it doesn't go
well,
that way. I'm with you.
What you're speaking.
I don't want to be.
What you're speaking to, Bill, was my rebuttal or my response to the guy who said we all need to buy AR-14s or 15s or whatever they are. And I said, no, what we need to do is strengthen the institutions of democracy in the United States.
Yes.
You know,
but if it,
go ahead.
But what I'm saying is, I was glad to hear that the military, there's guys that they don't want to stand for this. They don't want that kind of regime in power.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want it. And then I think this is going to be worldwide with Duterte, Putin, the Egyptian guy. You know, they've already started to purge their people. They're starting to, you know, they've already started a blood fest.
Oh yeah. Erdogan's got 35,000 people in prison just in the last year. Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. Thank you for the call, Tony. Tony in Huntsville, Alabama. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind?
Tom, how you doing?
Good.
Good. Listen, in Huntsville, Alabama, man, I just want to let you know that these people, these Trump supporters, they have their American flags. They've got their Alabama state flags with a picture of the state of Alabama with the Red Cross, the St. Augustine Cross, and they're in full attack mode. They are ready for the word to be given.
Wow.
That said, I believe
quickly, Tony,
that they're using the same on blacks that they did on whites with Obama.
There you go. I agree. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back in just a minute. It's 27 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Seize the Time, the story of the Black Panther Party and Huey P. Newton by Bobby Seale. This is from page 85, a subchapter titled Huey Backs the Pigs Down. And there are a few words in here that I'll be filling in, as it were. They're walking, he says, one day as we were walking out of the office, I guess we'd been there about a month or so, a pig passed by. He saw us coming out of the office with shotguns and pistols on our sides. About 6 or 7 of us came out of the office there in the daytime, and we looked at the pig as he passed by, and he jumped on his radio because he saw us coming out of the office with these pieces and stuff. We had just finished field stripping weapons, learning about 00 buckshot, learning about the 9mm and the .45, and having a political education session. We had a .45 and a .357 Magnum in the group and a couple of M1s. We had 3 or 4 shotguns by then. We bought up guns like a son of a bitch then. The pig went down 2 blocks and turned around, came back up the other side of the street. They were building rapid transit, BART, right down from Grove Street there, and we went up the other side of the boulevard and came back. We readily assessed that the pigs were ready to see what the F was happening, that this pig had radioed in, and he was running it down, how he had, quote, seen some N-words come out of a place here with some guns and blop, blop, de bloop, etc., come out of this office with guns and stuff. He was radioing into other pigs to help get him. Huey had his father's car that day, and he goes through that whole thing. So anyhow, the police pull him over, and Huey got in the car, and the pig came up to the window. You have any driver's license? So Huey rolled the window down. That wasn't more than a 3 or 4 inch crack in the window. Huey handed his license out the window. Is this your true name, the pig said? And Huey said, yes, that's my true name, Huey P. Newton. Is this your true address, 841 47th Street? And Huey said, yep, that's my true address, 841 47th Street. And what are you doing with the guns? And Huey said, what are you doing with your gun? This particular pig decided he wasn't going to argue, so he went back and got his little writing pad there where they fill out S-word. Your true name is Huey P. Newton? Huey said, that's right. The pig wrote it down. Your true address is 841 47th Street? Huey said, that's right. The pig then looked at his license. What's your phone number? And Huey said, 5, and stopped and wouldn't say anything else. And the pig said, 5 what? And this is when all the S-word between the pig and the party and the pigs began. Huey said, the 5th Amendment. You ever heard of it? Don't you know about the constitutional right of a person not to testify against himself? 5, I don't have to give you anything but my identification, name, and address, so therefore I don't even want to talk to you. You can leave my car and leave me alone. I don't even want to hear you. What do you mean, the pig said. And Huey said, just what I said. The constitutional right of any man is that he doesn't have to testify against himself. and Huey had a big M1 sitting to his right with his hand on it. I had this 9mm sitting beside me, and Huey had this M1 at his side. Huey was driving. 4 other brothers were in the back seat. One of them was Bobby Hutton. They were being quiet because Huey told them to be quiet, and the pig is going crazy. He's by himself, and Huey's got all these black N-words in the car going for the MFer. Meanwhile, while the pig is trying to get bad, 3 cars drove up behind us and 1 in the front. Some more were in the driveway. Blop, blop, blop de blue. Then another car came in front of us. A pig jumped out of the car, walked up to our car, and said through the crack in the window with a hoggish voice trying to sound intimidating, "What's going on here?" And Huey said, "The same basic procedures that are supposed to go on." Huey rolled the window down another 5 or 6 inches. The pigs were looking at the guns in the car. "Can I see that pistol there?" one of the pigs said. "No, you can't see it," Huey told him. I was beginning to get skeptical about what was happening because he pointed to my 9mm pistol. Huey was on probation, and if they thought that this was Huey's pistol, I didn't know this law stuff the way Huey knew it, so I moved the pistol over beside me real close. It had been lying in the middle of the seat. I said, "No, you can't see it." Huey said, "No, you can't see the pistol, nor this," pointing to his rifle. "And you don't want to look, and I don't want you to look at it. You don't have to look at it." "Is that your pistol?" he asked Huey. And I said, "No, it's not his pistol, it's my pistol." I said that because I was thinking the man's going to jump on Huey because he already told me about the probation law. If he gets caught with a pistol, he's burned. But if he gets caught with a rifle, the man can't mess with him because his probation officer told him he can carry a rifle or shotgun, and he couldn't stop him. The pig said, "Can I see it or not?" So Huey said to me, "I'll talk." And then he said to the pig, "No, you can't see the pistol. Get away from the car. We don't want you around the car, and that's all there is to it." "Well, I can ask him if I can see his pistol or not," the pig says. So I says, "Well, you can't see my pistol." The MFers tried to get indignant. They were blabbing and oinking to each other about who in the hell we thought we were, and Constitution my ass, they're just turning it around. Then the pig said to Huey, "Who the hell do you think you are?" "Look, damn it," Huey said. He opened the car door. This is where Huey got mad. I mean, you have to imagine this N-word. He got mad because these dogs were going to carry on, and they were bracing up like they were bad. Huey didn't go for this at all. Huey got very mad. He opened up the door saying, "Who the hell do you think you are?" In the first place, this man, pointing at the pig, came up here and asked me for my license like he was citing me for a ticket or observation of some kind. This police officer is supposed to be carrying out his duty, and here you come talking about our guns? Huey put his hand around his M1 rifle and continued, "We have a constitutional right to carry the guns, and anyway, I don't want to hear it." The pigs backed up a couple of steps, and Huey was coming out of the car. Huey had his hand back in the car getting his M1, and you know, if you've ever seen Huey, he gets growly but articulate. He came out of the car with his M1. Huey knows this law so well that he wouldn't have had the one M1 loaded inside the car. So he came out of the car, he dropped around into the chamber right away. Clack, clop. "Who do you think you all are anyway?" Huey said to the pigs. And the pigs were all on the sidewalk harassing all the brothers and sisters who gathered around. "You move on down the street," said the pig. Huey started interrupting. "You don't have to move down the street. Don't go anywhere. These pigs can't keep you from observing. You have a right to observe an officer carrying out his duty." And these pigs, they listen to all this S-word, and it goes on from there. It's a great story. Seize the Time by Bobby Seale.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thom Hartmann here with you. Dorothy tweets about National Popular Vote at NATL Popular Vote. I'm pretty sure the website is National Popular Vote. Yeah, it is nationalpopularvote.com, and definitely worth checking out if apropos of our concern about how our elections went. Layla Abdulaziz is with us with she's the digital organizer with Fight for the Future. Fightforthefuture.org is the website. And Layla, welcome back to the program.
Hey, thanks so much for having me back.
So today there are actions all across the country to fight for net neutrality. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, that's right. So we have about 68 actions outside of Target House congressional offices across the country today. We are working to get the right amount of votes that we need in the House to force a vote on the CRA, the Congressional Review Act resolution that the Senate has already passed, and pass it through the House. We're less than 40 members away from the votes that we need to force a vote on the CRA in the House. And we organized members and net neutrality supporters from across the country to rally outside of strategically identified House offices today and to deliver a letter from small businesses that are calling on House members to support the CRA.
And Layla, people can find out information on that at fightforthefuture.org. Is this something that just you guys are doing, or is this part of a coalition of other groups as well?
Yeah, this is definitely part of a coalition. We're working with our partners Demand Progress on this action, as well as our partners at Free Press have also been supporting events, and many, many other organizations and allies across the country.
Great.
We're seeing hundreds of people have turned out to these events already today. The events in the East Coast just passed, and we had a lot of positive report backs from people talking to the staff of their House members and just really calling for accountability and reminding these House reps that this is not over, that the Internet has not forgotten about this issue, that Congress has a chance to save net neutrality this year, and the CRA is their only chance to do so.
So this is like your opportunity to be a citizen lobbyist. And also the telephone number for Congress, if you want to call, is 202-224-3121 and ask for your member. This is in the House of Representatives. And what we're trying to do is get what's called a discharge petition, which forces Paul Ryan to hold a vote on whether or not to basically reverse FCC Chairman Ajit Pai's action of destroying net neutrality. If we reverse that, we get net neutrality back. We're back under Title II of the Telecommunications Code. Do I have all that right, Layla?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
I know it's a lot. It sounds a bit complicated, but the CRA is a unique rule that Congress has to basically oversee federal agencies such as the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. So if the House passes this, again, the Senate has already passed the resolution in a historic 52-47 vote. And now we're looking for just under 40 more representatives to join the CRA effort to force the vote, which would see us pass it in the House.
That's great. And these are all Republicans you need. Are there any Democrats who haven't signed on yet?
There are probably 15 or 16 more Democrats that have not signed on yet. And I think I can, off the top of my mind, I know that, for example, the Philadelphia area representatives have yet to sign on to the CRA. So there's very, very few. There's only a handful of Democrats. We expect them to come on in the coming weeks. We're asking their constituents to keep reminding them, to keep asking them to do the right thing, and we hope that they will. But yeah, there's still about 15 Democrats that we're waiting to see them sign on the CRA.
Okay. If you guys could email me that list, I would be glad to promote it on the air. That is to say, please call and courteously and friendly, ask these people who are, presumably on your side to do the right thing. So
absolutely. Absolutely. We have to remind them that the Democratic caucus in the Congress has created a position on this. It is asking all Democratic members to sign on to the CRA. So now it comes down to constituents, I think, to really show these representatives that they care and that this matters and that they're paying attention.
There we go. Layla Abdulaziz, the website fightforthefuture.org. And Layla, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too. Great talking with you. Okay, let's pick up some of your phone calls here and get back to some of the topics we've been covering. Jennifer in Seattle. Hey, Jennifer, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to make a point. I think a lot of Republicans are forgetting their basic Sunday school teaching, which is the devil can quote scripture. I double majored in psychology and sociology, and this is actually a pattern that we see on both the micro and macro level throughout history. Autocrats and tyrants use propaganda to turn their followers against the ideals and values of the society. Abusers brainwash their victims to turn them against family and friends, to isolate them, which just makes them more dependent on the abuser, so they will defend the abuser more fiercely. And, villains will always use slick language to succor you. The devil can quote scripture, and this is exactly what it looks like.
Yeah.
And I think that it would do a lot of Republicans well to remember basic Sunday school teaching.
You said it brilliantly. That was a very, very, very articulate, very clear, got it. Jennifer, thank you. That was nice and tight and right to the point. Steve in Topanga, California. Hey, Steve, what's up?
I just want to make a point that I think that the problem, how we got to where we are, is the dumbing down of our educational system and the lack of historical knowledge through education. And the other point I'd like to make is I think that there's so few people that vote anymore, that maybe half the eligible voting population votes, and you divide that in half, So a quarter of the eligible voting population is electing, you know, on the national level.
Yeah.
So I was thinking maybe mandatory voting might be needed because it's all predicated on being a participatory republic.
Yeah, it works in Australia. We had Professor Richard Silverstein on the program when he was visiting Louise and I here a couple of weeks ago, and he's Australian. And he was talking about how people in Australia love it. They don't mind the fact that, you know, they get an addition to their tax bill if they fail to vote. Instead, they show up and they vote. And, you know, they don't make it hard to vote, by the way, there either. You don't have to stand in line for hours, and voting's done, you know, in ways that doesn't interfere with your ability to go to work. So, you know, it's not quite as painful as we've made it here. But I think your point is really, really well made, Steve. Thank you very much for the call. Bingo. James in Spokane, Washington. Hey, James, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I was noticing you talking about Rupert Murdoch earlier.
Yeah.
You're aware, we're all aware, I'm sure, that RT was forced to register as a foreign agent.
Yep.
If Rupert Murdoch's not a naturalized citizen, shouldn't he and Fox News be required also?
He is a naturalized citizen.
Oh, heck. Can we shoot him anyway?
I mean, that doesn't mean that he can't register as an agent of a foreign government, but I don't think that Fox News is an agent of a foreign government. I think they are an agent of the worldwide billionaire class. And the worldwide billionaire class has an agenda, and it's splitting the middle class apart. That's their agenda. Destroy the middle class. Split these people from each other. Turn people against each other in every way you can. If you can separate them by race, great. If you can separate them by class, even better. If you can separate them by religion, super, use it. If you can separate them by you just figure out any way you can. And the billionaire class, through their vehicles of the very well-funded right-wing hate radio, and you know, this Ken Vogel did this piece in Politico 2-3 years ago talking about how you know, billionaire money via the Koch brothers being laundered essentially through the Heritage Foundation and others is ending up in the pockets, to the tunes of millions of dollars a year, ending up in the pockets of Hannity and Limbaugh and all these other right-wing talk show hosts. Nothing like that happens on the left. There's nobody writing checks to me, you know, or any other progressive host. You know, we're doing okay, but it's not like that. And you know, you've got this right-wing infrastructure that has been built over the years that you know, the main goal of it is to convince the average person that whatever's good for the billionaires is good for them. Whether it's dialing back on environmental regulations, somehow that's going to get you a job. Or, you know, in fact, actually, you know, environmental regulations create jobs. Somebody's got to design those scrubbers. Somebody has to install those smokestack scrubbers. Somebody has to clean those smokestack scrubbers. These are all jobs, right? But you know, it's like this is their job, is to convince us of these things. So anyhow, James, I get your point. Marta in Big Bear Lake, California. Hey, Marta, what's up?
Yes, hi. In regards to this article that you read, I don't know. I'd never heard of that guy before, but I was involved with the Ross Perot campaign back around 1991, I guess, right after the savings and loan crisis had almost put me out on the street, wiped me out. And I was angry. And the core group of Perot campaigners, we were out on the streets all the time passing out literature and everything. And, you know, there was a lot of anger there. And I got to know these people. And, you know, we talked a lot. They talked a lot about the Trilateral Commission, one world government, the Council on Foreign Relations, and how the Democrats and the Republicans were part of this one world government thing. And, you know, a lot of it, I mean, I wasn't into that kind of thing. They were worried about guns or gun rights being lost. And what I'm coming to, you know, doing a lot of reflecting on that. And I think that what's going on today with this cultural divide is that a lot of people have lost, there's a lot of fear. They fear the loss of democracy. NAFTA, the World Trade Organization, were horrible.
Right.
And you know, people have some real, you know, they have some real issues.
Oh, there are real concerns. You're absolutely right. And Ross Perot tapped into those, and there was a whole right-wing group that did attach themselves to them. Marta, thanks for the call. Thanks for and thanks for making that point. We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back in 4 minutes with Bob Ney with Talk Media News. And welcome back. And let's see here, Steve in Chicago. Steve, Steve, I've got to put you back on hold. You're listening to WCPT, which is in commercial break right now. Let's see, Corky in Rochester, New York. Hey, Corky, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Hello, Tom. Yeah, this is, I told you before, this is a crime family. Now I want to know about all these Russian collaborators, such as the congressmen and senators that are backing Donald Trump. Back in Joe McCarthy's day, he would have had a circus over here.
Yeah.
Because Trump is involved with the communists.
Well, the Russians aren't communists anymore, Corky. They are hyper-capitalists. The Russians are more, they're practicing a purer, a more laissez form of capitalism in Russia than we do here. It's less regulated than here. And, you know, which may account for why the billionaires are so fond of it. But, you know, what happens when you have a highly unregulated form of capitalism like you have in Russia is you end up with oligarchs. And, you know, and as we have deregulated capitalism in the United States since the election of Ronald Reagan, what have we seen? The emergence of multi-billionaires. If you look at the period from World War II until Reagan's election, it was a 30-year period, there were very few people who became fabulously rich. Lots of businesses were created. It was a period of the strongest economic activity in the history of the United States. 3 consecutive decades of annual GDP growth that averaged over each decade at least 3%, which had never happened before in American history. I mean, this is just, it was solid. The middle class grew, everybody got richer, but the top tax rate was 91%. And it was dropped down to 74% in 68. But you know, it was basically above 50%. And Reagan came in and dropped that down to 25%.
Sarah Palin would have called this lipstick on a pig.
Say that again?
You know, it's still a pig.
Yeah.
It's still communism.
It's still communism? No, what you know, communism is, you know, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Everybody works as hard as they can at what they're good at and throws everything that they make into the collective pot, and then everybody, you know, says, here's what I need, and that comes out of the collective pot. And we know that, you know, communism works well in societies of fewer than 150 people. It works well at the tribal level. It works well on a kibbutz. It works well in very, very small communities and communes and monasteries and things like that. But you know, it does not work when you get beyond 150 people. And just like laissez-faire capitalism doesn't work when you get a large enough population that the righting mechanism of capitalism, which is shaming, no longer works. You know, if the laissez-faire theory is that businesses that screw their customers will eventually be put out of business because word will travel about them. But if in a large country, you can move from city to city with a rip-off business, and you know, the word never does travel. So, you know, it doesn't work in a very large society. So this is why we need to have these regulating systems. Corky, thanks a lot for the call. It's always nice to hear from you. We'll be back. Bob Ney is going to be with us with Talk Media News in just a minute. Stick around. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by XChair, the XChair chair, office chair. XChairTom.com is the website, XChairTHOM.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. More information is available over at thomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Thom, THOM. Check in with Bob Ney and Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, Ellen Ratner's new book. On the line with us, the author of Sideswiped, Bob Ney. Congressman, welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Tom. How are you?
I am great, but I'll get better. So what do you see at the top of the news?
Well, I'm getting into Trump-Russian madness trying to follow all these stories, literally. I mean, it's following them is tough. Let me start from this morning, where the Russian ambassador to the United States, this was yesterday actually, and released this morning, said that there were two important verbal agreements with Putin during their private conversation, and one would be arms control and the other would be Syria. Now, there could be a wide variety of things, although we really haven't found out what is coming from President Trump's end, because the staff, according to what we found out from the media sources, Tom, they don't know what happened. They weren't brought in on it.
Well, I mean, those could both be good things, Bob. Wouldn't Donald Trump, if he worked out some kind of a deal with President Putin to have, to help the refugees and bring some peace to Syria? And what was the other one you said?
Well, it was Syria just in general, and then
the arms control stuff.
Arms control.
Yeah, and arms control. I mean, those are desirable outcomes. I would think that Trump would be bragging about that.
Well, that's where I come into suspicion, because you're correct, and I gather what you're saying. If in fact it was something on the positive side, especially after the last few days of the barrage, that the president's had from Republicans, also on his statements about Putin, I would think that would be shared with the staff. Are there areas they can help, humanitarian aid, et cetera, and then a reduction of nuclear arms, of course. But that hasn't happened as far as we know. Now, there were reports this afternoon where we were picking up pieces where President Trump has now called for a second Putin meeting on top of everything. And he said, his quote today is, this afternoon, is he is, quote, looking forward to meeting again with Russian President Vladimir Putin to begin implementing issues they discussed during their summit this year, which means, if you read through that they did do some kind of agreement, then they need to implement it. Now, he had this major, of course, comment he made, and then he accused the news media of being, again, quote, an enemy of the people. So he's...
That is such strong language. I mean, that is the kind of language that you typically hear from dictators and tyrants.
Right. And
no American president has ever said that in the history of this country, with the possible exception of John Adams, who imprisoned over 20 newspaper editors who were writing things that he didn't like. And that's why Thomas Jefferson didn't talk to him for 2 years and left town the day that the Alien Sedition Act was signed in 1798. Yeah, amazing stuff.
It's very strong language, enemy of the people. We've heard that in movies. We've heard that in statements. We hear that in the Banana Republics. You hear enemy of the people. Yeah. And that's the phrase he's used twice now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's
incredible.
So what else is up? All of this, honestly, Tom, is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to back up now from wouldn't or would, but again, a lot of the Republicans have still held firm. Not all of them, but a lot of them have held firm of the condemnation because the amount of heat obviously they're getting on the issue.
And yet, the Republicans had 2 votes this morning. One was a committee vote, and I think the other was a larger one. One was to subpoena the translator. That was killed in the House Intelligence Committee, unanimously by the Republicans. And the other was to fully fund the program to allow states to strengthen their election infrastructure, and the Republicans shot that one down.
Right.
What's going on with your former party, Bob?
Well, I'm not there to help them.
It must be. It must be.
I don't know what's going on because, you know, we passed, obviously, with Steny Hoyer, the Help America Vote Act, massive, and Ted Kennedy, the late Ted Kennedy, you know, and did some things like that. And now you can't even pass the most simplest things to help with the election, you know, process because they don't want to do it. Now, they did bring up the resolution, of course, non-binding. Do you support ICE or don't you? And a lot of the Democratic side, you know, hit present, you know, versus a yes or a no on it. But that was brought up, of course, to make a divisive issue, you know, and to make a divisiveness within the Democratic side.
Well, and to generate ads for the fall.
Right, correct. Although I do want to mention this, the health care, which you and I talked about specifically about a month ago, when you know the campaigns were kind of starting out, and the Democratic side had targeted the health care. And at the time, a lot of people said, why are they doing that? Well, there is a reason, and they're continuing to do it, and that is because, in fact, in the Senate Democratic side is saying, hey, we need to enjoin and, you know, do something with a legal basis to go for pre-existing conditions to make sure we stand up against some of the attorney generals that want to eliminate it. Healthcare is going to blow up very, very soon as a major issue.
Yeah,
and
I agree. And in part,
they own it.
Yeah, and in part, it's because the Republicans have taken a meat axe to Obamacare, and the result of that is the premiums are going to be exploding.
Correct.
Come October when these new numbers get rolled out. Bob Ney, author of Sideswipe. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
We'll be back. Jeff Charlotte's going to be with us, in fact. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beats. More information is available over at thomsbeets.com, thomsbeets.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Thom, Thom. Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Ralph Nader's most recent book, Breaking Through Power. It's easier than we think. This is from the first chapter. It's titled Plutocracy of Maximums, Democracy of Minimums. When I was a student at Princeton University, I learned from my anthropology studies the concentration of power in the hands of a few is common to all cultures, societies, nations, tribes, cities, towns, and villages. Even where the thirst for self-governance and democracy is strong, as was the case in New England towns before the American Revolution against King George III, wealthy Tories were there too. In central and western Massachusetts, the farmers used the term the river gods to describe the rich merchants using the Connecticut River as a possible profitable trading route. These days, most people protesting for economic justice use the term the 1% to describe the ultra-small group of people who wield enormous influence over our society today. There is something about the differences in skill, determination, lineage, avarice, and pure luck that stratifies most people from the rulers who dominate them. In the political realm, the few become dominant because they hoard wealth and are driven to exercise power over others. When a small group rules a society, the political system is considered an oligarchy. And when only money and wealth determine how a society is controlled, the political system is a plutocracy. From the standpoint of a democratic society, both oligarchy and plutocracy are inherently unjust and corrupt. Of course, there are variations in the degrees of authoritarianism and cruelty that each system exercises over the communities it relies on for workers and wealth. Scholars have resorted to using phrases like benign dictatorship or wise rules or paternalistic hierarchies to describe lighter touches by those few who impose their rule over the many. Thomas Paine simply called them tyrannies. People, families, and communities can only take so much abuse before they rise up to resist. The job of the rulers is always to find that line and provide the lowest level of pay, security, housing, consumer protection, healthcare, and political access for society so that they can extract and hoard the greatest amount of wealth, power, and immunity from justice for themselves. In many ways, the majority of Americans live in a democracy of minimums, while the privileged few enjoy a plutocracy of maximums. This small volume is not just about the ravages of power or the assaults against disadvantaged and downtrodden communities. The subject here is the dominating influence of the 1% in business, politics, health, education, and society as a whole. Over the past 50 years, Americans have suffered the relentless commercialization of everyday life, their privacy and their childhoods, their parks and prisons, their public budgets and foreign policy, their schools and religious institutions, their elections and governments, and the most basic societal institutions of them all, the family. Consider all the family functions that have been outsourced to business. Eating, cleaning, childcare, counseling, therapy, entertainment, sports, lawn work, simple repairs have been increasingly commercialized, commodified, packaged, and marketed back to us as products of luxury and convenience. Even mother's breast milk has been displaced by infant formula. In a plutocracy, commercialism dominates far beyond the realm of economics and business. Everything is for sale, and money is power. But in an authentic democracy, there must be commercial-free zones where the power of human rights, citizenship, community, equality, and justice are free from the corrupting influence of money. Our elections and our governments should be such commercial-free zones. Our environment, air, and water should never fall under the control of corporations or private owners. Children should not be programmed by a huckstering economy where their vulnerable consciousness becomes the target of relentless corporate marketing and advertising. American history demonstrates that whenever commerce dominates all aspects of national life, a host of ills and atrocities have not just festered and spread, but become normal. Enslavement, land grabs, war, ethnic cleansing, serfdom, child labor, abusive working conditions, corrupt political systems, environmental contamination, and immunity from the law for the privileged few. History also shows that whenever there have been periods when enough of the country organizes and resists, we see movements of people and communities breaking through power. Progress is made, rights are won. Education and literacy increase, oppression is diminished. It was in this manner that people of conscience abolished the living nightmare imposed by the laws and whips of white enslavers. The nation moved closer to promises of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness expressed in the Declaration of Independence. We won more control over our work, our food, our land, our air, and our water. Women secured the right to vote. Civil rights were elevated and enforced. Public schools, improved environments, workplace collective bargaining, and consumer protections did not spontaneously evolve. They were won by people demanding them and breaking through power. These moments of great progress are expressed in terms of new legislation, regulations, and judicial decisions that directly benefit life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The book, Breaking Through Power, by Ralph Nader. Breaking Through Power, it's easier than we think. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The book.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is Jeff Sharlet. He's the author of numerous books, including The Family, The Secret Fundamentalism at the Heart of American Power, and C Street, The Fundamentalist Threat to American Democracy. He's also an associate professor of English at Dartmouth College. His website, jeffsharlet.blogspot.com. You can tweet him at Jeff Sharlet, S-H-A-R-L-E-T. And Jeff, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Tom. Good to be with you.
It's been a while since we've talked. You're also contributing editor at Harper's and Rolling Stone, I should add, the author of 6 books. Jeff, this piece in I believe it was the New York Times, What Was Maria Butina Doing at the National Prayer Breakfast, quoted you in yesterday's paper. And it was, it raised a whole bunch of questions for me and a whole bunch of flags that I wanted to get your thoughts on. If you could recap for people who, may not have been with the program so long that they remember our previous conversations or may not be familiar with your work, who is the family, or what is the family? Where did it come from? What is its purpose? And then I'd like to get into why is this particular Russian agent of influence, shall we say, she hasn't been charged with espionage, trying to infiltrate it or play in that sandbox, Jeff?
The family is the oldest and arguably the most influential Christian conservative organization in Washington. It goes all the way back to 1935 when it was founded as an explicitly anti-democratic and especially anti-labor coalition. It was an anti-New Deal. That was what they understood their mission to be for the first 30 years or so. And more recent times, they're dedicated toward building a sort of an international network of elites. They believe that they serve God not by serving the poor, but by serving those whom they call the up and out, elites in power who are in a position to bring about this sort of kingdom of God they want. And their only public event, they're very secretive. They're kind of dedicated very explicitly. The longtime leader says the more invisible you can make your organization, the more influence it'll have. But they do one public event, and that's the National Prayer Breakfast, held every year in Washington on the first Thursday in February, at which the U.S. president always attends, as well as other heads of state and congressmen and Supreme Court justices. And it seems like a pretty blandly ecumenical event, but what they consider it as is a recruiting device with which they draw those with whom they want to have ongoing relationships into deeper conversation, which is exactly how Maria Butina used it. She didn't infiltrate the prayer breakfast. She used the prayer breakfast the way it was meant to be used.
Wow. So, tie this to the house on C Street and tell people about that. And is the principal agenda of the family still the destruction of the New Deal, ending Social Security, ending Medicare, ending minimum wage, ending labor protections, ending the right to unionize?
Yeah, that second part is a really great question because, of course, the New Deal is long gone in so many ways. But, yes, I think it's fair to say that their vision of the kingdom of God is one of a kind of laissez-faire economics.
A libertarian kingdom.
It's sort of libertarian, except libertarian for the rich and not for the poor. They believe if you're rich because God made you rich. God chose you to be rich.
Oh, so this is Calvinistic.
It's very Calvinistic, and that plays right into the house on C Street. They maintain a number of properties a big mansion called the Cedars in Arlington, Virginia, where they host political dignitaries. They have similar real estate in Moscow, in fact, where they also host a national prayer breakfast. And on C Street, a house where they provide sort of subsidized housing for a group of congressmen who are in close covenant with them. And listeners may remember some years ago, back in 2009, a number of political figures, Mark Sanford, John Ensign, a congressman, all got caught up in sex scandals. And it was all through the C Street house. The family went to bat for them, helping to cover up the scandals because it believed these men were chosen by God. That's how they work, and you can see how appealing that is to someone who wants to do sort of backdoor work in American power. Here's an organization that specializes in working behind the scenes.
Remarkable. So what, beyond subsidizing housing for Republican congressmen, which seems, is like kind of the visible thing, and putting on this, once a year, let's all talk about how nobly religious we are, prayer breakfast thing. Is the family involved in specific policy issues?
No. That's one of the things that distinguishes them. As an organization, and in fact in their documents they say, we as a group don't take action. Rather, action arises out of the groups that we organize. They organize the men and few women with whom they work into what they call prayer cells. And you'll have a sort of a weekly or bi-weekly meeting that's sort of a Bible study, but it's also a way for you to collaborate. So you might collaborate on a business deal, and that's happened a lot at the National Prayer Breakfast. All kinds of lobbying gets done there. You might work as Vice President Mike Pence did to help move some legislation beneficial to American missionaries in Sri Lanka and sort of trading access to American arms for that legislation. Or you might, like Maria Butina, seek to improve relations between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, not just through her attendance at the National Prayer Breakfast, but when we look at the affidavit, and she's quite clear about the ongoing relationship, and a relationship that I should say stretches backwards and is on both continents. It's not just that she came to the National Prayer Breakfast, it's that lead organizers of the family went to her in Moscow, meeting with her and her boss, her handler, Alexander Torshin, because they, frankly, saw this as a good way of making deals.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I would think that most people, regardless of their party affiliation, would agree with Donald Trump when he says that our having a non-hostile relationship with Russia would be a good thing. But then, the devil's always in the details with these kinds of things. How is, I did not realize, or maybe I forgot, that the family has a branch in Moscow. How did that come about? And are they trying to influence Russian foreign policy? I mean, what?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. In 1992, Doug Burley, who is now the leader of the family, he's been the leader for just a year, since a long time. Previous leader died after 40 years of sort of running the thing. Doug Burley is sort of an old Russia hand. He's a longtime evangelical leader. 1992, he founded the Moscow Prayer Breakfast, which is allegedly where Maria Butina started making contact with actually NRA officials. And he also founded numerous other small organizations, prayer cells, one of which he brags is about 25 years ago he founded a group for young men, young promising men, and he says these guys are now some of Russia's leading business leaders. That's how they seek to do that influence, is to build these relationships from the ground up. And, to return to a point, Tom, you said, we'd all agree that a non-hostile relationship is better. Sure, but I guess I think the really deeply troubling thing about how the family works, and this is how they always work, is they seek those relationships not through any democratic means, but, as they put it in their own language, beyond the din of the vox populi. This is this pretentious little bit of Latin.
Vox populi is Latin for voice of the people.
Right. they say, beyond the voice of the people. That's where they think decisions should be made. And they really revere an idea of a strong man. Their understanding of Jesus is deeply unorthodox, even for the Christian right. They compare Jesus to say, you want to understand Jesus? Look at other strong leaders in history. Hitler, Lenin, Mao. That's them speaking. I'm not saying they're secret Nazis or certainly not secret communists.
Wow.
They admire strength. And that gives us a clue into their understanding of how you make peace between countries like the United States and Russia. It's not through democratic, open conversation. It's through serving the authoritarian impulses of men like Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin.
Does the family take public positions on things? You said that they don't do policy; they just bring people together. But I mean, even something as bland, presumably, as yes, it would be a great idea if the two, largest nuclear powers of the world had a good relationship. Do they even go that far?
No, they take no public positions at all. And in fact, until 2010, in response to my reporting, they denied that they existed.
Really?
Despite the existence of 600 boxes of documents at the Billy Graham Center archives. Billy Graham Center. This is no lefty center of lefty conspiracy mongering. The documents were all there. The tax documents were all there. And if you ask them, they would say they didn't exist. In 2010. In response to my reporting on another one of their international involvements in the country of Uganda, where they had helped create something called the Kill the Gays Bill.
Yeah, you and I talked about that at the time.
Yeah, we talked about that at the time. They finally came forward and they said, yes, on national TV, they said, we've been very secretive. Charlotte's right about that. We've been maybe too secretive. And we're going to start a website. We're going to go public. They started a website. I don't think it's been updated since then. It doesn't tell you anything. And that is the last of their public visibility. Even now, we have Doug Burley, who, is either one of the unnamed organizers in the affidavit or certainly as the lead organizer of the National Prayer Breakfast knows more about it. It would seem like the right time for him to be speaking publicly about what he knows.
You're talking about Maria Butina and the Russians.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the Maria Butina.
Yeah. Affidavit, yeah.
Exactly, that affidavit. They know something. Come forward. Show your commitment to transparent dialogue. If you believe in peace between these two nations, help it happen by putting it out in the open instead of this behind-the-scenes cloak and dagger kind of work.
Yeah, it's remarkable stuff. Jeff Charlotte, he's a journalist, contributing editor to Harper's and Rolling Stone. The author has 6 books, including The Family, The Secret Fundamentalism at the Heart of American Power, and C Street, The Fundamentalist Threat to American Democracy. He's also associate professor of English at Dartmouth College. JeffCharlotte.blogspot.com is his website. You can tweet him at Jeff Charlotte, SHARLET. Jeff, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Tom. Always good to talk with you.
Great talking with you, too. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Bill in Ashland, Oregon, watching on Free Speech TV. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Good afternoon, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
My brother pointed out that if you change the stress accent on certain words, it makes a big difference. When you say communism, if you change it to communism, it has a different effect upon people.
Sure.
It gives them the idea that it actually is a communal effort. It's a slight thing, Tom, but it has. I know you're very sensitive to language.
Yeah. No, it's a good point.
Another good example of a different thing would be to continue to use the word meddling. Meddling, as somebody said in the New York Times, it sounds like a couple of old ants.
Yeah.
Disputing over whether their nephew should be
meddling is what your mother-in-law does. I mean, in quotes. I mean, my mother-in-law actually doesn't meddle. she's sweet, but I mean that's meddling is like in a family. This was not meddling.
No, this was a little bit more. It's not even needling. It was taking a machete to the whole affair. Anyway, Tom, thank you very much. Enjoy your program immensely.
Okay, thanks a lot, Bill. It's good to hear from you. I appreciate the call. Joan in Colonial Heights, Virginia. Hey, Joan, what's on your mind today?
Hi, how are you doing?
Good.
It's just about Donald Trump. He's gotten this our whole system in an uproar. Everyone is worried, scared. Kids don't know if they're going to have a future or not. And people need to stop being scared of this man and run his immigrant history, because he's an immigrant. Why doesn't he look at his background? The picture of his mother is terrible. His grandmother, her middle name is Christ, and she died July 6, 1966. So 3 6s in her death date. So that's automatic. He's a demon. But the people that are supporting him now, they're suffering. Why don't they just get him out of there? Just run him out of town. Run him out on the rail. Who cares?
Well, whether he's a demon or not, Joan, I'm not going to go down that road with you. But the people who are following Donald Trump are the people who watch Fox News, basically. Which is programmed by one of Trump's fellow billionaire autocrats, oligarchs. Mm-hmm. So here we've got an oligarch in the White House, and we got an oligarch running a major television network, and the major television network is supporting. The billionaire in there is supporting the billionaire in the White House. No surprise. And together they are collaborating to basically, keep people fooled, to cause average working people to think that if you get rid of the unions, somehow your wages are going to go up, when actually all history tells us it's the exact opposite. To get average working people to think if you give a tax cut to the billionaires that you're going to have more money at the end of the day, which, it's the opposite. And we're seeing that right now. Wages are down 2% this year.
Yes.
So
I was looking, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I know we don't have much time, but I was looking in the Federal Civil Rules book. There's a way to get him impeached because, see, people don't know. He's not a real legitimate president. I don't address him as a president. I just say Donald Trump, because he has no legal schooling. He has no legal experience. He's nothing. He just buys hotels, hires people, and So the thing is, it says to get him impeached is for him to get convicted of a crime.
Right. Well, actually, the way it works, Joan, is the conviction happens in the Senate. And the Senate has to convict him of high crimes and misdemeanors after the House has charged him, which is what's called impeachment. But you're spot on, Joan. Thank you very much for the call. We'll be right back. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. XChairTom.com is the website, XChairTHOM.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beats. More information is available over at tomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Tom, Thom.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thom Hartmann here with you, and Ron in Central Michigan. Hey, Ron, what's on your mind?
Tom, you brought up Roger Cohen's editorial, worst case scenario.
Right, yesterday we're in the last paragraph. For people who don't know what we're talking about because they didn't happen to listen to that segment, Roger Cohen in the New York Times yesterday said that basically the worst case scenario that Norm Ornstein was projecting was that Trump would, at some point, if he or his family members are charged or indicted or even just seriously exposed, that he would activate his followers and they would go out into the streets and there would be bloodshed, and then Trump would declare martial law and put in jail all the Democrats, basically. Yes, back to you, Ron.
Yes, there's actual historical precedence for that between Russia and the United States. We go back to 1908 and the Kiev program in Russia, in which Jews were attacked, slaughtered, raped, and murdered. And
this was before the Russian Revolution.
Pre-Russian Revolution, 1908.
Huh. I didn't know that happened when the czars were in charge.
So, what under investigation, this was sanctioned by the imperialist government. And what they did, they went to, they got out-of-town thugs to come in and carry out the program. In our own country in 1908, you had a program in Springfield, Illinois, in which the white Christians sacked the black community, same thing program. Okay, and it was the same type of people, okay? Right. And what we have today in today's government, we have an imperial Russia that is touting that same message, and we have in our country a fascist government forming solidly. And the goal that you said, those Trump thugs, whatever you want to call them, NRA gunmen, the deplorables, they are the ones that would carry out the same things. So the precedent is there. The movement is there. The people are there. We must be vigilant. We must be prepared to defend ourselves in any circumstance, whether politically or physically, Tom. The message must go out. I refer you to the program in Kiev, Knefa, in 1908.
I'll have to check it out, Ron. And there are plenty of historical precedents, as you accurately point out. And thanks for the call, Ron. Both in the United States and elsewhere. And this is why we have to be very careful. This is a very, very dangerous time. And, when you've got figures on the right calling for people to be armed, when I get callers from the left calling for people to be armed, this is not how you make a republic, a democratic republic. It's not how you make it work. It's how you tear it apart. And I'm very concerned that we're being torn apart by these billionaire-funded propagandists who are trying to pit us against each other. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
More of your calls and the news of the day and my thoughts on all the above right after this. In this camera, right? 3. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Minority Leader, How to Lead from the Outside and Make Real Change by Stacey Abrams. This is from Chapter 1, although the introduction is fascinating too, where she talks about, Rhodes scholarships and stuff, but this is Chapter 1. I sit in the living room, a cozy space, warm in the early summer. I'm perched on the edge of a sofa next to Valerie, the home's owner, a lovely black woman in her late 40s. Across from us, seated close together on a wide settee meant for one, are her 2 children, a son and a daughter. Politicians rarely visit their streets, which are nestled in a poorer community in South Georgia. Valerie beams with pride that both her children are headed to college in the fall. David, 17, plans to study criminology. Maya, 18, her belly round with her first child, intends to become a middle school teacher. Both newly graduated from high school, Maya will give birth in mere weeks and begin college months later, an unwed teen mother. Her intended school is more than 3 hours north of her home, so her mother will raise her newborn baby while she starts her freshman year. Valerie speaks matter-of-factly about the coming challenge, raising a new child just as hers leaves the nest. Still, she is determined that both her children pursue college degrees that she never received. Maya, the mother-to-be, wonders how she'll do so far away from home and her baby. Yet in the next breath, she explains how college will be the best for her and her child. Their future success rests upon her. I've come to their home as part of my campaign for governor, so I asked Valerie what she expects of someone like me. What can I do to help make lives like hers better? In her soft voice, she replies, she just wants options for financial aid for her children. They will succeed, she says, if they can afford to stay in school. As I look around the modest home passed down through the generations, I understand both the pride and the desperation tangled in her response. She got them through and has given them the tools to carve out better lives for themselves. We chat more about the worries she's lived with all those years, our discussion turning to the crime and poverty in their neighborhood. Then I ask Valerie what she wants. At first, all I get in response is a quizzical look to suggest I need to reconsider my bid for higher office. Or that suggests. I repeat, what do you want for you? What secret dream do you have for yourself? Her confused expression turns to one of surprise. I don't know, she tells me. I've been a cashier at the Piggly Wiggly for 20 years. You must want something, I probe, something you'd like to do for you? A daycare, she admits quietly. I'd like to start a daycare center for unwed mothers like my daughter, so more girls can finish school and pursue their dreams. But that ambition is beyond her. Her body language, her tone of voice, her averted gaze speak louder than her words. I press her, but she demurs with a smile. Let's just see what happens if you win the governor's job, she says. Valerie's house in South Georgia is not too different from the squat red brick house where I grew up on South Street in Gulfport, Mississippi. An oak tree grew out in our front yard, shadowing the front sidewalk, forbidding grass to grow beneath its shade. Pink azaleas bloomed each spring from bushes that flanked the front door. Our rented house and the other set close by teemed with children, all black, all working class. We played in our postage-stamped yards, make believing the fantastical, superhero exploits, cops and robbers. As we got older, we'd talk about moving to New Orleans or living in one of the mansions along the beachfront that lay less than 5 miles away, across the railroad tracks that ran in between our neighborhood and the more wealthy environs. We dreamed of more, while our parents' lives centered around survival and making it from paycheck to paycheck. Instinctively, we understood that more had to be possible, even if we didn't know what to do to get there. These imaginings, these desires, are the roots of ambition. As adults, like Valerie, we tend to edit our desires until they fit our construction of who we're supposed to become. In such a world, I wouldn't dare dream of running for higher office, for mayor or governor or president. At least for now, Valerie sees herself retiring in 20 more years from Piggly Wiggly as a cashier, rather than as a small business owner who helps the community raise its children. From our brief meeting, I could see she had the fire, albeit of a low burn, of a minority leader. She had ambition, she had vision, but she didn't have the faith, and understandably so. Whether we come from working class neighborhoods or grow up comfortably middle class, minorities rarely come of age explicitly thinking about what we want and how to get it. People already in power almost never have to think about whether they belong in the room, much less if they would be listened to once outside. These men, and they are usually men and typically white, do not have to grapple with low expectations based on gender or race or class. Ambition for them begins with reminiscences of old times and older friendships or newer alliances. The ends have already been decided. Only the means are to be discussed. Most potential minority leaders feel the same lack of faith Valerie had, at least at some point in their evolution. We may not know how to get the first job, let alone make it to the big chair. We don't know how to take the leap from accepting our fates to actually changing them, and not just a little, but radically. Then there are those who simply don't know what they want. The drive to achieve burns inside, often without a clear target. We want to be something, but what that is remains hazy. Often we cannot articulate our goals because they lie just beyond the reach of who we're supposed to be. Ambition's scale is irrelevant. What holds us back is not scope, it's fear. And because we don't know what to call our dreams, don't know how to make them happen, or are pretty sure we'll be disappointed, we just stand still. But becoming a minority leader demands that we embrace ambition as our due. Stacey Abrams. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. 34 minutes past the hour. And Frank in Cold Row, Idaho. Hey, Frank, what's on your mind today?
I had a simple question. How are people not traitors to the American people when they support the invasion of America by the foreign invaders?
Are you, I don't know what you mean.
Well, what I'm saying is how anybody supports the invaders of America.
The invaders being, are you talking about Putin or are you talking about Mexicans?
I'm talking about Mexicans.
Okay. So can you name for me, Frank, any. I'm guessing you got this talking point from Fox News, and I'm telling you, they're lying to you.
No, I didn't. I got it. I just got up by seeing what's going on. We got
okay,
Nancy,
so
we got
so
Nancy
great.
Pelosi
Can you name for
Waters,
me, Frank? Stop for a second. Can you name for me one Democratic politician, because I want to just destroy this person's career, who is calling for open borders and unlimited immigration in the United States? Name one, please.
Waters.
No, that's Maxine Waters is not taking that position.
Yeah, she's supporting the illegal invaders.
No, she's not. There is not a single Democratic politician or any politician of either party in this country who says that we shouldn't have borders. There are, however, libertarians. Rand Paul is close to that we should have. Rand Paul has taken the position in the past. I don't know if he still holds it, that there should not be immigration laws.
You're not answering my question.
What was your question, Frank?
My question was, anybody that supports the invasion of America, how are they not traitors to the American people?
I think they would be.
Oh, then
what I'm saying is
support the Mexicans.
What I'm saying is that if you want to talk to somebody who thinks that we shouldn't have immigration laws, you need to be talking to libertarian Republicans, because that's the position of the Libertarian Party.
Then anybody who supports the invasion of America by the Mexicans is a traitor, right?
I think that anybody who supports the invasion of anybody under any circumstances is, at the very least, not a patriotic American. Yeah, here's the problem, Frank, and this is the problem when you get your information from Fox News or from Donald Trump. A, they're lying about Democrats wanting open borders and all this kind of stuff. It's just a plain old flat-out lie. B, they're lying about what even sanctuary cities are, and I'm guessing you don't know, and we can have that as a conversation if you'd like. And C, this is a problem that started in 1986. Prior to 1986, you had every year about 500,000 people would come from Mexico up into the United States, typically during the agricultural picking season. They would pick crops throughout the summer and fall, and then they would head back down to Mexico in the winter. It was an annual migration that went back and forth. A few people would stick here and there, but it was not that big a deal. And the reason why was because prior to 1986, if you were a wealthy white employer, and you hired people who were in this country without documentation, you went to jail. And the unions worked really, really hard to enforce those laws so that even non-unionized employers, the unions would find out, hey, this meatpacking plant down the street here is hiring illegals. They would make sure that the CEO went to jail. And Reagan, when Reagan did his amnesty in '86, he stopped enforcing the law against employers. And so now you've got a situation that's been going on since 1987, where meatpacking plants and construction crews are literally, and which used to be two of the most heavily unionized industries in the United States, 100% American workers, 100% unionized, meatpacking and construction. And I'm guessing, Frank, you're old enough to remember this. I certainly am. And what happened in '86 when Reagan said, I'm not going to enforce the laws against rich white employers anymore, is that those employers right now, you can go down to Mexico and you can find broadsheet newspapers like your shopping guide kind of newspapers in the cities along the borders, where you will find ads in Spanish for meatpacking plants in the upper Midwest. You will find ads in Spanish for construction sites in Las Vegas. They are bringing people into this country who are without documentation, and they love it. The Republicans and the Libertarians love it. This is why Donald Trump is importing workers from Mar-a-Lago. He just brought 80 people in from Europe to work in Mar-a-Lago because they will work at a lower wage.
Why do the Democrats refuse to help us deport them?
Democrats are entirely in favor of deporting people who are not here legally.
Are they? Well,
in fact, that was the hit on Obama, was that he was the deporter-in-chief. Obama deported more people than any president ever had in history because all of these people are coming because of Reagan's policies.
Why do we have sanctuary cities run by Democrats?
Okay, the reason for, and that's a really good question, Frank, and I hope that we can understand each other on this. If you live in Coal Row, Idaho, right? So if let's say that somebody you're home at night and it's 11 o'clock at night, you've fallen asleep in front of the TV, and there's somebody who shouldn't be in your neighborhood who is breaking into the back door of your house. Okay, you with me so far?
Yeah.
Now you got a neighbor who isn't in this country legally. You got a neighbor who came in response to one of those help wanted ads that the rich Republicans put in the newspapers down in Mexico, who's working at the meatpacking plant down the street or 7-Eleven or whatever it may be. But that neighbor is not a legal citizen. That neighbor, if they think that if they have any interaction with the police, the local police, the police in Cold Row, Idaho, if that neighbor thinks that if they dial 911 to save Frank's ass, that they're going to go to prison or get deported, they're not going to dial 911.
They shouldn't even be here.
I agree with you, but they are. And so if they are here, don't you want them working with the police rather than fleeing the police?
Deported. I want them all deported.
Well, that's fine. If you want them all deported, the easiest way to do it, Mitt Romney proposed this, by the way, that he was ridiculed for this, but it actually makes sense to me, is you start arresting these rich white employers. And they will stop running help wanted ads, and they will stop hiring people who are here without documentation. And what are people going to do when they can't get a job and they can't get welfare because they have no proof that they're a citizen? They're going to leave the country. And in fact, to some extent, in the last couple of years, that's been happening. We've actually had negative migration, with the exception of the people who are fleeing the wars in Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador that Ronald Reagan started. Reagan started those wars.
Why are the Democrats supporting them?
Supporting whom?
The illegals.
No. The way a sanctuary city works, Frank, is that if I'm a cop in Cold Row, Idaho, and somebody calls me up and says, I just got raped, or my next door neighbor, my neighbor's house is being broken into right now. I'm watching it happen. And I go out there and I interview that person, and I notice that person has brown skin and speaks with a Spanish accent. Then I'm not, if it's a sanctuary city, I'm not going to call ICE. I'm simply going to enforce the law, because it's not the job of the police in Cold Row, Idaho, to enforce immigration law.
Of this nation?
Federal officers enforce federal laws. City officers and state officers enforce city and state laws. It's a basic.
I got a question for you. What's going to happen when the American people rise up and run the trash out?
Oh man, Frank, if you're, are you calling for violence against people?
If it takes that to clean America of the illegals, yeah, they're invaders.
If all you got to do, Frank, is put some of these rich white employers in jail. I'm telling you, that's all you got to do. Frank, I'm sorry I couldn't get through to you. I thought maybe I could. Lori in Exeter, New Hampshire. Hey, Lori, what's up?
Hi, Tom. So happy to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, that caller, God bless you for trying to get through to him, but he was, a door. It was a locked door. No way you were getting through. But what I wanted to talk about is, I am starting to get nervous. That man reflected an attitude that unfortunately a good amount of people share. And I live in New Hampshire. It's not uncommon for me to see people carrying holsters with guns. It's not uncommon for me to see Trump signs. And everything is so divisive, and people are getting the temperature is really going up. It's really gone up this week.
Yes.
So without being an alarmist or reactionary, really, what do you see? I know you don't have a crystal ball. You know a lot about history. Where do you think we're going? And what should a person do to prepare themselves in this crisis?
Yeah. In 2014, I wrote a book about this scenario, Lori, and the publisher suggested that it be titled The Crash of 2016, tragically. Which meant that by 2017 nobody was buying the book, but it's still in print. Oh. And basically the premise of the book is that every time America has hit the reset button, and we've done it 3 times in history. We did it in the 1770s after the great crash of 1770. We did it in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. We did it in the 1860s after the great crash of 1856, which led to a massive depression, which arguably led to the Civil War, and we rebooted after the Civil War. And we did it in the 1930s after the Great Republic, what was referred to up until the end of World War II as the Republican Great Depression of 1929. We did it then. And by the way, each one of these events were roughly 80 years apart. And what we find is that Arnold Toynbee famously said, perhaps, I've never been able to verify the quote, but it's attributed to him, that when the last man dies who remembers the horrors of the last Great War, the next Great War becomes inevitable. And and it's much like the guys who lived, the men and women who lived through the last Great Depression would have laughed the Republicans off the floor of the Senate when they proposed doing away with what's the bill that separates investment banks from brokerage houses, and Glass-Steagall. But they were all dead, by that time, or completely out of power.
Right.
So about every 80 years, we make the exact same mistakes, and we end up with the exact same result, which is a Great Depression followed by a World War, followed by a major reset. And I am predicting that's going to happen, and it's going to happen sometime in the next few years. In fact, I think, frankly, it's going to happen in the next 2 years, but in 2014, I thought it was going to happen in 2016. So my crystal ball is fuzzy, but I know it's going to happen. And that reset process is is how cultures and societies reset themselves. It's how we have. Let's hope it's not as bloody as the Civil War or as worldwide bloody as World War II, and that we can make it through with minimal damage. But there will be a reckoning for all these excesses, and hopefully something good will come out of it. I mean, historically it has. I don't think this is a time to panic or freak out. I think it's a time to get active, to get ready, to insert ourselves into Democratic Party politics, or if you're inclined into Republican Party politics. We need good people in both political parties, and find local groups that are engaged in activism in ways that are friendly to you, and participate. So that's my suggestion, Lori. I got to run. Thanks for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls and the news of the day right after this. And welcome back. John in St. Louis, Missouri. Hey, John, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Tom, for your program. It's really great. My question is, well, I'm going to give a little history little backstory to it. In March of 2015, 47 United States Republican senators violated the Logan Act, which was an act of treason. Yet none of them were ever held or a trial or anything.
Well, what was the specific first of all, refresh my memory as to what the Logan Act is. The
Logan Act is that no one can negotiate or without.
Oh, you can't do foreign policy, basically. Yeah, that's from the 1790s. Yes, I'm familiar with that. And so, how did these guys? Oh, you're talking about by trying to blow up the Iran deal?
Yeah. When they did that, they all signed that document, that paper, and they violated the Logan Act.
Yeah, I called them out about that at the time. You're right.
I said, hey, man, these guys violated the Logan Act. They all committed treason. They should go to jail.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that they committed treason, but they did break the law. And, yeah, that's what I was calling for at the time.
Yeah, but none of them went to jail. And
so where are you going with this?
Everybody kind of wanted to let it just pass and go by. Okay, fine. But they did commit treason, because that was an act of treason. Okay, so fine. We kind of let that go by. Now we have a Republican president who publicly is told a week before he goes to Helsinki, my God, those dang Russians, they attacked the United States. Here's the document of proof. There's 12 guys there that did it. We're telling you that, Mr. President. You know that going in there. What does he do? He knows that you have an enemy of the United States, and he stands there publicly and says, oh, no, this guy's the greatest guy in the world, man. I love this guy, and I don't believe anything that our intelligence community says, that's an act of treason, where he puts the needs of this nation over that.
And 70% of Republican voters, the poll was just released a few hours ago, 70% of Republican voters think that what Trump did was just fine with Mr. Putin, with President Putin there. And so, you know, I would say that that's because of the existence of a billionaire's, you know, an oligarch billionaire's network, that's Rupert Murdoch and Fox so-called News, basically putting that message out. And most Republican voters, I think, are now getting almost all of their news, if not all of their news, from Fox News. And the consequence of that is what we're seeing.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, but my question is, it was an act of treason. I mean, outright act. I mean, you had the former head of the CIA under Obama. He even said it. You even had John McCain. My God, I've seen some stuff that's pretty treasonous. Boy, this is real. Even he knew it was an act of treason.
Yep.
So what you have is you have a president who's committed treason. You had several Republicans that already do it in the past. So when has treason become acceptable in the United States? I mean, if that's what we're trying
I think it became acceptable when America elected a black president. I think that the irrational racism that President Obama's election brought out in the Republican Party, or that the Republican Party chose to exploit in order to achieve political power, including Donald Trump's birtherism, I think that was the point at which questioning even the President of the United States' legitimacy, I think that's where it began, John. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairtom.com is the website, xchairtom.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Superbeats. More information is available over at tomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Tom, Thom.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Derek in Roanoke, Virginia. Hey, Derek, what's on your mind?
Tom.
Derek?
Tom.
Derek?
Tom. Hello?
Yeah. What's on your mind, Derek? I'm here.
I'd like to ask you something. Have you ever asked a religious right person, these Christians, what does their heaven look like? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I don't know why you would want me to do that.
I mean, because I don't talk to them. I don't know if you talk to people like that, but when they call up and they hate on everybody and Mexicans, I always, I ask people, talk to people. I say, what does their heaven look like?
Oh, I think I understand where you're going with this, Derek. Are you suggesting that the guy who was anti-Mexican a little bit ago was that because he's a racist, and that if he dies and goes to heaven, he's going to discover that there's as many people of color up there as there are people who look like him? Is that your point?
Right.
Okay,
right.
I got it.
That's what I always wonder about them people, because is the heaven going to be all white?
Yeah, I think in their minds it probably is. It's probably a segregated place. I really do. Derek, I want to get a couple more calls in here before the end of the show. We're coming up on it. And Franklin in Savannah, Georgia. Hey, Franklin, what's up?
Hi, Tom. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
I have some comments about upcoming events, and I have some questions about you can inform me about the appointment of Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. And I understand he will have a hearing before Congress in about 2 months or something like that. But it's in the future. And I want you to, before I forget, I want you to get the word out and stress to the Democrats in Congress about questioning him about one of his opinions. Maybe you can enlighten me on it. Maybe I heard it wrong. Judge Kavanaugh, I think, either publicly made an opinion that a sitting president shouldn't be investigated or shouldn't be bothered. He could have written an opinion. Yeah, I think he wrote over something like 300 opinions. So this one opinion that I'm thinking about has to do with the future going forward. The one that I think he expressed, and enlighten me on it, that a sitting president should not be bothered and should not be investigated. He doesn't have time.
Right. Kavanaugh not only has said that, but he has also said in public forums that he would have reversed the previous Supreme Court decision, Olson versus somebody or other, that affirmed the right of an independent counsel investigation. Yeah.
Okay. So,
and I've been saying, and this is why, 2 weeks before Kavanaugh was selected, or a week before he was selected anyway, on the air right here on this program, I was saying Donald Trump is going to pick Brett Kavanaugh because of all the candidates, he's the only one who said that the president can't be investigated. And he's going to put him on the Supreme Court because he knows that if he refuses a subpoena from Congress, or if he refuses a subpoena from the Justice Department, then it's going to go to the Supreme Court.
Right, because he would be yeah, exactly. And the Supreme Court, with the if he's appointed with a 9-4 decision, clearly it will probably come down and agree with Kavanaugh, his opinion that a president.
Yeah, I think the odds are fairly high because the other Republican appointees are all acting in a totally partisan way on the Supreme Court. Franklin, thank you for the call. Thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What a day, huh? And I'm sure there's more to come tomorrow. Don't forget, between now and tomorrow, there's lots of opportunities to share with your friends about the radio station you're listening to this program on, or the TV station you're watching it on, or the internet site, or whatever it may be, YouTube, Facebook, whatever, to spread the word about this show and other good progressive media out there, to support our stations and our sponsors, and to get yourself and your friends involved. This is no time to sit on the sidelines. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
Cameron Hughes scours the world looking for the finest wines. You can get more information about Cameron Hughes and his wines at chwine.com/Tom, Thom.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Superbeats. More information is available over at thomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by XChair, the XChair chair, office chair. XChairTom.com is the website, XChairTHOM.com.